Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Justice? What a laughable thing. In this world, there is only the distinction between master and slave. The weak are slaves, the expert are masters, and the strongest is the master of everyone. And I, Tarklama. King Tlamakin raised the golden scepter in his hand high. The golden mask on his face looked up at the scorching sun in the sky and spoke his greatest ambition. Will, in the name of the slave king, become the master of the entire world. Chapter 61, The Arriving Doghead Battleship. Just as the 4 sides and the center of the Tutmos kingdom were plunged into war and chaos, unnoticed by both enemy and friendly forces, a headquarters warship with a doghead decoration on its bow slowly sailed from the distant sea surface. Vice Admiral, it seems Rear Admiral Avane and the others are in a tough fight. Should I take some men to help? Wearing a black-gray suit with a matching hat, a pure white coat of justice, and a black sheathed long saber strapped to his waist, this was none other than Vice Admiral Garp's exclusive adjutant. There was a legend in Marine headquarters. The strongest swordsman in Marineford might just be this Rear Admiral Boggart, who was relatively unknown to the outside world. The main reason was that for the past decade or so, every time Garp caught up to the Roger pirates, it was this adjutant who was responsible for stopping the Dark King Rayleigh. Someone once said that if Rayleigh was considered Pirate King Roger's right arm, then Rear Admiral Boggart was Marine hero Garp's left fist. Phew, ha ha ha, forget it. This is that kid's mission. For now, let them handle it themselves. Garp said with a loud laugh, looking towards the depths of the island. But in my opinion, with Rear Admiral Da'urag's current strength, the probability of defeating Slave King Tklama is very low. Rear Admiral Boggart showed a hint of worry. Although their location was quite far from Shabak City, the power of observation hockey allowed them to see the intense battle situation clearly. Isn't that great? Only by defeating a difficult opponent can one become stronger. At this point, Garp's expression became slightly serious. You and I both know that hockey can only be further improved in a limit state of actual combat. Although long-term high-intensity training also has an effect, the efficiency difference between the two is too great. Why did he train his fists by punching mountains back then? Wasn't it because he couldn't find opponents of the same level willing to accompany him? Whether it was Sengoku or Zephyr, they all had a pile of work to be busy with. Regarding Vice Admiral Garp's remarks, Rear Admiral Boggart chose silence, because he knew he couldn't change the other party's decision. Moreover, this slave king's strength, in my opinion, is just so-so. His armament hockey is just so-so, and his observation hockey is even less worth mentioning. Only his development of devil fruit ability is decent. Although his overall strength is slightly stronger than Dragon's, it hasn't reached a point where Dragon cannot contend with him. For some reason, Garp was talking a lot more than usual, and his adjutant Boggart behind him served as the best listener. In this old man's opinion, this guy is the most suitable opponent for that kid at this current stage. I guess he's also the opponent that kid is most satisfied with himself. Listen carefully, that kid is excited right now. After speaking, Garp laughed loudly again, looking happy. To be honest, he now felt a trace of goodwill and gratitude towards the world government. Because without the decision of the world government's high level, Dragon would have had no chance to become the commanding officer. After all, he was just a Rear Admiral, and he had even shown rebellious behavior before. If Marine headquarters had decided on its own, the lineup for this mission to capture King Tlamakin and thoroughly investigate Tutmos kingdom would most likely have been led by Sengoku himself, or he himself would have been sent, with Dragon at most being an attendant officer. But the 5 elders, for some unknown reason, overruled all objections and specifically chose Dragon as the commanding officer, and did not allow any combat power of Vice Admiral rank or higher to be brought along. To this day, Fleet Admiral Kong and Sengoku still suspect that the world government deliberately intended to trap and kill Dragon. He initially thought so too, but now, observing the actual battle situation, he found that this was not the case. The Slave King was not an opponent that Dragon was completely unable to match. On the contrary, A mission like fighting for hundreds of thousands of slaves would only ignite the endless will and strength within Dragon's heart, and this was the best catalyst for the improvement of hockey. Rear Admiral Bogard also nodded in agreement upon hearing this last statement. Although Dragon was being severely suppressed by the Slave King and looked quite battered in appearance, he could also feel the increasingly intense hockey presence. Besides, even if he truly lost in the end, it was nothing. Hadn't Vice Admiral Garp and he already arrived? Let's wait and see how long it takes for this Slave King to ignite Dragon's limit. Garp watched the direction of Shabak intently, his arms crossed. The sky above that zone was already filled with a large amount of yellow sandstorm, with a tenacious streak of green whirlwind appearing from time to time. At this moment, the battles involving the other Marine officer had already ended. After all, the effect of powerful water only lasted for 5 minutes, after which they would automatically die. Therefore, although the 50 elite brought by Dragon were all injured, fortunately, not a single one died. However, due to the gale and sand being too strong, they had to retreat from inside the city and gather on a high sand dune to watch the battle. But the problem was, they couldn't see anything. Everyone, the situation is clear to all of us now. We are no help to Rear Admiral Da'arag here, we're just wasting time. So, I suggest we go support the battlefield on all 4 sides. At this moment, a lieutenant colonel stepped forward and proposed this to everyone. Indeed. We can't waste time like this. The lieutenant colonel's words immediately received agreement and support from many people. But at this moment, another colonel counter-asked. How are we supposed to get to the various battlefields? What does that mean? The others looked over in confusion, thinking to themselves. How else could we go? Of course, by running. Seeing the gaze of these officers, this colonel understood that they hadn't realized the key point. He helplessly shook head and said. It seems you don't know much about the desert. I am from Alabasta and am willing to tell you. Although this Tutmo's kingdom is not as large as my hometown, it is still a medium-sized island. We currently have no fresh water, no tools to discern direction, and no mounts or vehicles whatsoever. If we just run into the sand sea like this, we will only be trapped to death and die of thirst. After this colonel said this, everyone suddenly realized. Indeed, when they came, they rode on a warship and flew over from the sky. Even so, it took quite some time. So, if they were to walk back on their own feet, looking out at the boundless golden yellow sand sea stretching as far as the eye could see, they fell silent. As for that flying warship, who knows where it was blown by the distant sandstorm? Even if they found it, Rear Admiral Da'arag was busy right now. How could he have time to take them flying? What should we do then? We can't just do nothing here, can we? These elite officers from Marine headquarters felt as if they had full combat power but nowhere to use it. Let's go save people. Let's recall, the core objective of this mission is to save the hundreds of thousands of slaves underground, not just to come here and slaughter the soldiers. Most of them are either on the battlefield on all 4 sides or have been dealt with by us, so there won't be many guards inside the city. Finally, a rare major who was good at thinking stepped forward, pointing out a new direction for everyone and making everyone's eyes light up. Well said, Lieutenant Colonel Amos. Saving hundreds of thousands of slaves is also a great achievement. But how do we get down? I remember the passage leading underground is inside the city. Another major raised his question. Leave it to me. At this moment, a burly figure wearing sharp claw gauntlet on his hands walked out with a smiling face. At the same time, he activated the ability of the animal system mouse fruit, mole form, and directly entered beast form, transforming into a giant mole with dark skin. Isn't it just digging holes? Follow me. As soon as he finished speaking, his entire body drilled into the sand layer like a large black drill, digging out a pitch-black large hole wide enough to accommodate 2 people walking side by side. Extremely grateful for the 5,100 kitty and coin tip from Reader Zoo. Also 2 monthly passes and 5 recommendation tickets. I bow. Thank you again, this is truly the biggest surprise today. Very, very grateful for the 100 kitty and coin tip from Reader Hammer Hayes. Don't know the way back cat character bar. I bow. Also, I've realized this plot section is a bit long, so I'm also shortening the process of the battle. Chapter 62, Great Sea Hurricane vs. Land Sandstorm. The most terrifying and destructive forces on a planet have never been humans or certain animals, but rather extreme natural climates. For thousands of years, they have been revered, feared, and even worshipped by people, who have created a special term for them. Natural disaster. Meaning a disaster from the heavens. Among these, natural disasters are divided into many types, and in the Desert Kingdom, the most common and most powerful is the sandstorm, also known as a sandstorm. Violent winds whipped up large amounts of dry soil, sand, and yellow sand, rolling and darkening the sky and earth, swallowing everything in their path and burying it all beneath the sand and dust. At this moment, Dragon was in the midst of such a terrifying natural disaster, engaged in a fierce life and death struggle with the slave king who controlled this natural disaster. The green whirlwind had long since condensed into a lifelike wind dragon circling around, blocking all sandstorms outside a radius of 10 meters. This was the limit of what it could do. Clang! This was already one of countless collisions between the claw and scepter, but the surging air current that swept out seemed even more violent than before. Wherever it reached, whether it was wind or sand, everything was swept away in wave-like patterns along with the air. But the endless sandstorm immediately returned, suppressing the visibility of the entire world to its lowest level. All that could be seen was a dim yellow haze and howling wind. What a troublesome fellow. King Tlemcen, hidden in the darkness with the help of the sandstorm, no longer had the initial relaxed and comfortable mindset. His face under the golden mask was already filled with irritation, anger, and ferocity. He had originally thought that with his strength, taking down Dragon would be effortless, and he would soon have another Logia System Ace slave. But who knew that the battle would drag on for so long? Dragon's evasive ability was simply too tricky. Whether it was the hundreds of slave rings or his own sneak attacks from the darkness, he could always miraculously avoid them one by one with various movements or methods. Like a true wind dragon, playing freely in the gale and sand sea, his observation hockey was truly so powerful that it gave the slave king a feeling of having his perspective broadened. Observation hockey could be used to this extent? However, one thing was very strange: as long as it was a scepter strike he swung out head-on, this dragon would not dodge at all. Instead, he would actively meet it head-on with his strange claw-style martial arts. Even though he was struck hard again and again, even though blood was seeping from the corner of his mouth, even though his green suit was tattered, he would still grit his teeth and push forward. To be honest, King Tlemcen didn't feel much at first, but now, after fighting for so long, he had a bad premonition. The key was that he was already using his full strength, yet he still couldn't completely defeat Dragon. This was the most frustrating part. How long could this little brat of Garps last? Just die quickly. The current slave king's mindset had gone to extremes. Every move he made was a full-strength, ruthless attack, completely disregarding whether he would kill Dragon. The clanging sounds were so dense, rapid, and frantic. The golden scepter, as black as ink, was swung into clusters of scepter shadows. Continuous sonic booms exploded, accompanying his furious rage as they poured onto the countless claw shadows. Every collision made Dragon uncomfortable for a while, but he still gritted his bloody teeth and persevered, and persevered. Although he wasn't sure if it was an illusion, Dragon had a feeling that the opponent's sense of power was gradually decreasing. The exasperated King Tlemcen finally admitted in his heart that he couldn't take down Dragon with just his martial arts and hockey. To be honest, he was very angry, but he had to accept it. Fortunately, his strongest strength didn't lie in himself, but in his slaves. He was a Paramsha system pet fruit ability user, the slave king of the underworld. Appear, Sand King. Whoosh! Suddenly, with a command from King Tlemcen, Dragon clearly noticed the surrounding sandstorm circulating rapidly. They were gathering in large quantities towards the former's feet, forming the outline of a giant object at a speed visible to the naked eye. When the finally formed existence appeared before his eyes, Dragon's pupils suddenly contracted. Because he saw a scorpion that was entirely earthy yellow, with thick pincers, a long abdomen, and a sharp stinger at the tip, its body size several times larger than a warship. Strangely, this scorpion was floating in the air with King Tlemcen on its neck. However, even so, the green ring on its abdomen was more eye-catching. So that's it. Is this the secret of why you can control Sandstorm? Dragon finally understood the principle behind this slave king's method. Ha ha ha, at this point, it doesn't matter if I tell you. Seeing Dragon's surprised gaze, King Tlemcen's mood improved slightly. He opened his left palm and used his ability to make it emit a green light, laughing loudly. This is the pet fruit's strongest awakening ability. Not only creatures, but even natural climates can be bound as my slaves. The reason I chose this island as my headquarters is because I have tamed the sandstorm here. It not only allows me to possess the ability of a Logia system, but also conceals everything for me, allowing me to hide in the darkness for decades. After speaking, the slave king looked at Dragon with a puzzled expression and asked. To be honest, I am still very shocked. How did you Marines find me? I wonder if you can enlighten me? Who knows? Dragon inwardly complained. After all, he was just following orders and wasn't a high-ranking Marine himself. However, on the surface, he just replied coldly. No comment. At the same time, he was inwardly examining the scorpion under the opponent's feet, which was called the Sand King. According to the Slave King's introduction, this was a true natural sandstorm, just forcibly shaped into this form by the pet fruit's ability. but judging from its previous ability, this clearly didn't affect its control over the sandstorm. In other words, his next opponent was the natural disaster of an island itself. No wonder King Tlamakan treated it as his ace Humphrey. If that's the case, I'll knock you out first. Then I'll find a new territory and have a good talk with you, as master and slave. King Tlamakan snorted coldly, then heavily stomped on the back of the scorpion beneath him, commanding, "Kill him, Sand King." Yes, master, this Sand King could actually speak. Although its voice was extremely hoarse and heavy, it clearly possessed a certain level of intelligence, truly like a smart pet. The giant stinger on the back of the Sand King vibrated slightly, and instantly disappeared from sight. Swish, suddenly, a red light flashed in Dragon's eyes, and at the same time, he dispersed into a green wind. The next moment, a long stinger glowing with black light struck the spot where he had been a second ago. Such fast attack speed. If it weren't for the hurricane fruit amplifying his observation hockey's perception ability, that strike just now, if he were without his ability, he might not have been able to dodge it. In fact, everyone has a preference when it comes to armament hockey and observation hockey. There are rarely experts who are equally proficient in both. In the past, he was like Garp, belonging to the type where armament hockey was stronger, but now his observation hockey level surpassed the former. At the same time, Dragon noticed that King Tlamakan's figure had disappeared, leaving only the enormous Sand King, pressing down like a scorpion-shaped sandstorm itself, covering the sky and earth. "Do you know, Slave King? Just thinking that if I defeat you, all the slaves will regain their freedom, then I have no reason to lose." The wind dragon that had been circling around him was now condensed onto his right hand, rotating at high speed, forming a visible green tornado. The next moment, Dragon bent and joined his index and middle fingers on his right hand, then separated the spacing between his ring and middle fingers, bent and joined his ring and little fingers, and slightly bent his thumb, forming a posture like 3 dragon claws. Dragon Claw Fist, Hurricane Dragon King. Boom, the surging claw force combined with the maximum output of the hurricane, accompanied by a high-pitched dragon roar of wind, fiercely collided head-on with the charging Sand King. This moment, or rather, what came next, would be the strongest confrontation between the hurricane from the Great Sea and the sandstorm from the land. Chapter 63, Crocodile's Arrangement Problem. In the bedroom of the Room of Authority in Mary Jo's. Im ultimately didn't dare to risk entering the world on the other side of the Stargate alone. The reason was simple: what if there was a group of god-level experts on the other side? If they appeared the moment he stepped in and immediately surrounded him and put him on the spot, wouldn't he be completely finished? As the saying goes, those with bare feet don't fear those wearing shoes. He wasn't just wearing shoes, he was dressed in splendid robes. Besides, no matter how he thought about it, there was no need to put himself in danger. He had plenty of subordinates in his vast world government, why not make good use of them? As for the issue of needing to make the Stargate public, he felt that as long as it was done step by step, there wouldn't be a big problem. After all, the control of the Stargate was in his hands. Ultimately, he chose to forcefully suppress his curiosity and close the Stargate. Since I've decided to send people in to investigate, I need to plan properly. The 5 elders are definitely the first people who need to know, but they are also leaders like me and can't personally carry out the mission. So, this heavy responsibility seems to only fall on Cypher Paul. Im sat on his large bed, deep in thought. However, I'll wait until after this reverie is over before starting the operation. The world government is busy enough right now, but we can start selecting candidates for CP. It was a pity that Rob Lucci and Khalifa were too young right now and were still training on Kona Island, which meant the few people he was familiar with couldn't be used at all. Forget it, it's just for gathering intelligence anyway. I'll let them figure it out themselves when the time comes. Just then, a pleasant ringing sound came from outside. Im was already very familiar with this sound. It was the sound of wind chimes that appeared whenever the maids needed to enter. Indeed, as soon as he walked out of the bedroom into the living room, he saw a beautiful maid holding a file bag, respectfully waiting by the door. Lord. It was worth mentioning that these maids responsible for serving Im's life didn't actually know his name. They only knew he was a highest-level celestial dragon, so they usually just addressed him as Lord. Yes, bring it here. Im sat down on the sofa and casually beckoned. The maid walked over, placed the file bag on the coffee table, bowed slightly, and then walked out of the treehouse. He took out the file report from the bag, and a look of surprise appeared on his face after reading it. What a good idea, truly a good idea. The 5 elders actually thought of such a brilliant method, impressive. What he saw was an operation plan. They were going to secretly build a treasury on an island in the New World Sea area that the Roger pirates had once passed through, then put a large amount of treasure inside. After that, Marine Headquarters and Cypher Paul would conduct a joint operation to bring it back to Mary Jo's via public broadcast, announcing to the whole world that the so-called One Piece great treasure had been found. Although it can't completely eradicate the appearance of pirates, it can indeed greatly weaken the influence of the Pirate King's treasure rumor. Im clicked his tongue in wonder, praising repeatedly. Truly worthy of being the highest boss of Cypher Paul, they play these schemes and tricks beautifully. In his opinion, the only risk of this plan was that the Marines' influence in the New World Sea area was relatively weak and could easily be subjected to large-scale attacks by pirates, especially needing to watch out for Whitebeard and Big Mom. As for Kaido of the Beast's pirates, there wasn't much to worry about. Firstly, he had just entered Wano country not long ago and was busy. Secondly, Kaido's strength was still in its growth phase. However, the five elders clearly also thought of the safety issue, which was why the report stated that they would conduct a joint operation with Cypher Paul. This meant that the Marines would be led by Sengoku and Garp, while Cypher Paul would dispatch Cypher Paul's Zero Agent and send out a highest combat power. Thus, the entire treasure escort fleet would have 3 admiral-level combat powers, 2 in the open and 1 hidden in the dark. As for Marine headquarters, there were still Fleet Admiral Kong and Instructor Zephyr, so there was no need to worry about someone attacking their home base. However, one of them was old, and although the others still retained the admiral rank, he had resigned from his admiral position after all. Therefore, Manafort could also be considered to have no admiral guarding it, appearing not very strong on the surface. 3 admiral-level combat powers, that's certainly enough. Let them go ahead and do it. Thinking this, Im decided to approve the execution of this operation plan, and even added a note to execute it as soon as possible, preferably before the reverie convenes. He was too aware of the power of the Great Pirate Era, so he attached great importance to it and would not tolerate any delay or negligence. Just then, Im discovered there was something else in the file bag. He took it out and saw it was about the situation of Monkey D. Dragon and Slave King Tlimican. Looking at the detailed description and clear on-site photos on the intelligence, he didn't know what to say. As for the content of the photos, it was just a clear sandstorm. To put it bluntly, he still couldn't see anything. According to the information, Dragon's current situation was very bad and he could be defeated by King Tlimican at any time. Seeing this, Im's brows furrowed slightly. He had naturally already seen the files on this King Tlimican, but after all, he was the slave king of the underworld, and it was impossible for Cypher Paul agents to uncover all his intelligence. They only knew that 23 years ago, this person had already displayed the power of armament hockey and observation hockey. After that was a general introduction to the pet fruit, Paramsha, and based on this, they speculated that his hockey level was very strong and his ability had a high possibility of awakening. But the specific awakening ability was unknown, as there had been no incidents of the Slave King going all out in recent years. After all, he was a businessman. However, now it was clear. The awakening ability of the pet fruit could actually capture natural sandstorms and control them as pets, gaining an ability similar to the Logia system. This is interesting. As expected of a Paramsha system awakening, it really leans towards concepts. To be able to develop this seemingly ridiculous pet fruit to this level, this Slave King does have something going for him. Im felt some recognition for King Tlimican's talent in his heart. Since he could capture sandstorms, could he also capture avalanches, volcanoes, tornadoes, and so on? Moreover, he suspected that this Slave King had not achieved the fullest development of the pet fruit's awakening ability. One must know that there are differences between awakenings. What he was concerned about was the quantity. It was written that the Slave King only had 1 sandstorm pet. Was it possible that he could actually capture more natural pets? However, turning a sandstorm into a pet reminds me of that sand crocodile. He should have already set sail by now, right? Ever since successfully forcing Gecko Moria into Impel Down, Im had developed a collecting obsession, always wanting to round up these future famous talents. This is something I can have people look for. It shouldn't be hard to find. I remember Crocodile and the 19-year-old Bullet fought multiple times, but each time ended in a draw. If this were him before crossing over, he might not have remembered it so clearly, but after crossing over and inheriting Im's full strength, his mental aspect also belonged to the Superman level, and his memory was naturally greatly enhanced. Finding him and bringing him back isn't difficult, but the problem is how to control him and make him obedient. Moria at least had his crewmates as hostages. This crocodile really has a somewhat impregnable quality, and how to use him after capturing him is also a problem. At this moment, Im shifted his attention from Dragon to Crocodile. It was simply because he didn't think Dragon would lose. As the son of the previous generation's protagonist, Garp, and the father of the next generation's protagonist, Luffy, wasn't it only natural for him to have a power-up, achieve an underdog victory, and turn the tide against all odds? Besides, wasn't Garp watching nearby anyway? Chapter 64, A Boy's Dream. Deep within a massive space located 100 meters underground in Shabak City, the enormous Pyramid Royal Palace remained conspicuous. However, the stone slab corridor, once bustling with people, was now sparsely populated. Only pairs of slave guards could be seen patrolling back and forth, whips hanging from their waists and battle axes in hand, inspecting the numerous prison cells on either side filled with slaves. Although this place was underground, it wasn't dim. Numerous electric lights provided ample illumination, giving it a feeling similar to late afternoon. Hey, how do you think the battle above is going? I have a bad feeling about this. What are you thinking? You know His Majesty's strength. I heard the Marines only sent 2 rear admirals this time. What could possibly go wrong? But His Majesty has been up there for so long, and there's been no news at all. I thought he'd be back soon to lead us in retreating. Instead, batches of those slaves are being sent to the surrounding battlefields. After hearing his companion's words, the other slave guard, who had originally been confident in their side, also became hesitant, no longer bothering to check on the situation of the slaves inside the prison cells. Suddenly, a rapid whooshing sound echoed in their ears. The two instinctively became vigilant, but before their gazes could even shift, they felt a sharp pain in the back of their necks, followed by a squelching sound as their throats were pierced by a single finger. Ugh! With a dull thud, the two collapsed to the ground. Driven by the strength of their survival instincts, their hands tightly clutched the bloody holes in their necks, but they still couldn't stop the warm blood from flowing through their fingers. Behind him stood a Marine major wearing a coat of justice, barehanded, his 2 fingers slowly bending. Ah! It's the Marines. Did the Marines came to save us? The slaves in the prison cells on both sides, upon seeing this major, their originally despairing, numb, and hollow eyes suddenly revealed a look of hope. That's right, we're here to save everyone. However, there are too many of you. To facilitate management and avoid causing chaos, please remain patient inside for now. Once we've dealt with all the criminals, specialized government personnel will naturally come to arrange for your resettlement. This major seemed completely unconcerned about the other 3 teams of slave guards rushing towards him. Instead, he gently comforted the surrounding slaves with a warm expression. At the same time, he noticed that most of the people held in the prison cells were young women, along with some young girls and boys. It was understandable that there were no elderly people, as they had no value as slaves, but it was strange that there were no young and strong men either. Just then, a girl in a prison cell on the left side, seeing the fierce-looking slave guards charging over with blades, quickly called out sweetly to the major in the corridor, "Be careful. Mr. Marine." Hey, thank you for the reminder, beautiful miss." The major gave her a handsome smile. The next second, he raised his right index finger, bent it, and struck out at ultra-high speed, transforming into afterimages to point at the 6 steel axes chopping down towards him. Finger gun, Yellow Lotus. This was a common advanced technique of the Navy 6 style's finger pistol. The basic finger pistol was a single shot in a fixed direction, but this technique was rapid fire, and during the process, the position could be changed arbitrarily up, down, left, or right. Depending on one's mastery of it, the number of rapid-fire shots also varied. With his current strength, he could pierce out 12 finger guns in 1 second. Almost instantly, the axe blades around the major were easily shattered, and immediately after, the Adam's apples of their owners were cruelly pierced through. Suddenly, there were 6 more slave guards lying on the ground, clutching their throats undead. Ah! Seeing this scene, the women and girls in the cages on both sides turned pale with fright. Some boys directly buried their faces in the arms of the women beside them, trying to escape this cruel reality. Meanwhile, from a bird's eye view of the entire underground space, one would see many white shadows moving at high speed, slaughtering the patrolling slave guards. Exclamations would turn into piercing screams within seconds, followed by cheers and calls for help echoing from the prison cells everywhere. At this moment, all the slaves were so excited that tears welled up in their eyes. Those white greatcoats, inscribed with the words "Justice," became the most beautiful scenery. Especially the young boys, who tightly gripped the bars of the prison cells, staring intently at the heroic fighting posture of every Marine officer, their eyes shimmering with a radiance called yearning. However, the entire battle came and went quickly. There were simply less than 300 slave guards left behind. This amount of meat was not even enough to fill the gaps between the teeth of 50 elites from Marine headquarters. However, they didn't kill everyone. They casually captured a few alive to serve as informants. After some rough interrogation, they got a general understanding of the situation here. So those black-marked zealots before were royal guards who drank powerful water. A lieutenant colonel pinched his chin, an unsurprised expression on his face, then squatted down and pointed at the green light collar on the informant's neck. And this thing, a creation from the Pet Fruits ability. Under the order of King Tlamakan, The body will unleash 100% of its strength without restraint. Coupled with the medicinal effect of the powerful water, this slave king truly doesn't treat you guys as anything important. Hearing this, the captured slave guard warrior showed a miserable bitter smile on his face. He was originally captured as a slave himself, and after being fitted with the collar, he became a slave guard who had no choice but to be loyal. A colonel beside him said with a serious expression, "Besides this, what I'm more concerned about is that the slave king used his ability to control all the male slaves and sent them to the surrounding battlefields. With their bodies capable of unleashing 100% strength, plus the absolute numerical advantage, I can already imagine the pressure the Marines there are facing." Another lieutenant colonel nodded and said, "We must hurry there to provide support." As soon as he finished speaking, another major walked out, squatted down, and asked the captured slave guard, "Since you've lived here for a long time, you should know about the fast entry and exit passages and methods." This. Just as the slave guard was worried that he would lose his value once he told everything, a brown-skinned boy in the adjacent prison cell, who looked about 7 or 8 years old, shouted loudly, "I know. I know." "Oh?" All 50 Marine officers looked over in unison, which startled the boy into silence. Fortunately, the major walked over and smiled gently. "Little friend, are you willing to help?" "Yes." The boy reacted. Although he was wearing handcuffs, he still shouted excitedly, "I want to be a Marine too in the future." "Ha ha ha ha, that's great. It seems our Marines will have excellent talent joining us in the future." The major reached out and ruffled the boy's hair, asking, "Then tell me, what do you know?" "These bad guys brought us here using a rail car, it's in that direction." The boy shouted, pointing in a direction based on the impression in his mind. "Is that so? That's wonderful, you've helped a great deal." The major was overjoyed, then asked, "Child, what's your name and how old are you?" "My name is Zayuzio, and I'm 8 years old." "All right, my name is Lieutenant Colonel Amos, currently a headquarters major. If you join the Marines someday, you can contact me." Saying this, Lieutenant Colonel Amos took a pen from his coat pocket and wrote a string of numbers on the boy's sleeve. "This is my Den-Den-Mushi number." Immediately after, Lieutenant Colonel Amos stood up, turned to look at his colleagues, and suggested, "I suggest leaving 10 people to guard here, and the other 40 split into 4 teams to rush to the respective battlefields. How about it?" Although only 10 headquarters officers could provide support to each location, it was still quite formidable combat power against the Slave Guard Legion of the Tutmos Kingdom. Agreed. 5 minutes later, after a quick discussion, 10 people who had the greatest consumption or heavier injuries in the previous battle were chosen to stay behind, while the other 40 disappeared from their spots with whooshing sounds. This scene shocked the red-skinned boy, and his eyes became even brighter. "I must become a Marine, absolutely. The plot will develop step by step. The book hasn't even reached that many words yet. Some readers shouldn't be too impatient. Matters of people's livelihood, systems, technology, and the military will all be written about. The world government is vast, and the pirate planet is even larger. Don't you eat one bite at a time? If you have any good ideas, you can share them, and I will accept them, but please don't be too aggressive or speak so harshly, acting as if it's completely unreasonable if I don't write according to your ideas. Can't we just communicate calmly with each other?" Chapter 65, The True Hurricane Dragon King. 3 days had passed since the joint fleet of Marine Headquarters and the South Blue Branch launched their siege on Tutmos Kingdom. Looking towards the interior of the island from the sea, one could clearly see that in the distant central zone, the yellowish sandstorm no longer reigned supreme. A patch of green gale, seemingly representing vitality, was now contending with it. As for the desert battlefields along the 4 coastal sides, the brutal melee combat had come to a temporary halt with the Marines' retreat back to their warships. Only the yellow sand soaked with blood, the ground littered with severed limbs and broken bodies, dried remains, cracked axes, and snapped blades silently testified to everything that had happened before. On the Marine side, Rear Admiral Avane had ordered the whole army to temporarily withdraw from the battlefield about a day ago. This was because the military strength of the Slave Guard Legion was simply too vast. Those young adults wearing green collars around their necks truly surged out from underground in an endless stream, while their own troop numbers were fixed, and their physical ability and condition were constantly declining. Actually, at first, Rear Admiral Avane hadn't even considered retreating. But after the 10 headquarters officers who had accompanied Dragon on his raid on Shabak City returned via the underground rail car and brought back detailed information, they finally gained a concrete understanding of the Slave Guard Legion's situation. 1. Behind the enemy lines. Or rather, underground. There were tens of thousands more young adults ready to join the battle at any time. 2. They were restricted by the pet fruit ability. Their bodies could exert their maximum strength, and they would absolutely not flee during combat unless they received a new order from King Tlimikan. 3. Rear Admiral Da'Urag did not collapse upon contact with King Tlimican. Instead, he managed to hold him off and was currently engaged in a fierce battle with him. Based on these points, Rear Admiral Avane ultimately decided to retreat to the warships. If they continued fighting, their side would simply be worn down to death, leading to the whole army being annihilated. The final result was the current situation. The main Marine troops fought as they retreated, returning to the warships to rest, treat their wounds, and recover their condition. Meanwhile, the Slave Guard Legion found themselves in a state of confusion. This was because the order they had received upon arrival was to fully prevent the Marine invasion, hold out until the king sent a new order, and then leave the island together by ship. But now the Marines had retreated, and their opponents were gone. So, they could only choose to return to the trenches to await orders, guarding against the Marines' next attack and waiting for the new order to arrive. As for returning to the underground space beneath Shabak City, that was impossible. Before receiving the retreat order, this action would conflict with the previous order, essentially being seen as unauthorized escape by the pet fruit ability, and the green light ring around their necks would directly prohibit them from doing so. Thus, these tens of thousands of Slave Guard Legion members were essentially confined within the range of the surrounding battlefields by the pet fruit ability. Truly, made by the pet fruit, and broken by the pet fruit. As for a new order, it wouldn't be coming anytime soon, because King Tlimican was currently busy. Huff. Huff. Heavy and rapid breathing made the chest cavity inside his body feel like an old bellows. Every time it inhaled a breath of air, it fueled the rage within him, making it burn even fiercer. Why can you still move? This slave king of the underworld was currently half kneeling on the back of the Sand King high in the high altitude. His bloodshot eyes glared fiercely at Dragon in the distance. He could no longer suppress his anger and had become hysterical. His biggest changes were probably the fact that half of the golden mask on his face was shattered, his white robe was stained with blood, and his right hand, which held the golden scepter, was trembling. King Tlimican remembered very clearly that over these 3 days, relying on the strength of the Sand King and his own superior haki, he had knocked Dragon down 3 times. But every time he thought the battle was over and he was about to gain a Logia user slave, this bastard would inexplicably open his eyes, stand up, and attack him again. Once, his green light ring was less than a meter away from Dragon's neck. That wasn't even the worst of it. Why did this guy burst out with various kinds of strength every time he got up, becoming more and more troublesome and difficult to defeat? Cough cough, I told you, justice will definitely triumph over evil. Your fate is already sealed, which is to be personally captured by me and thrown into Impel Down. Dragon, maintaining his element transformation, floated in the world of wind, struggling to utter every word. At this moment, he truly looked utterly miserable and wretched. His coat of justice was largely damaged, his green suit on his upper body was nowhere to be seen, his bare chest was covered in bruises, his face was pale, his forehead dripped with cold sweat, looking utterly disheveled as if he could lose consciousness at any moment. However, dark green electric arcs occasionally flickered across his body, and his gaze was incredibly bright and resolute. Stop spouting nonsense. What kind of damn justice and evil? King Tlimican didn't want to hear any of that. The first time you fell, you awakened Conqueror's haki. The second time you fell, your armament haki was already on par with mine. And this third time you fell, you motherfucker awakened your devil fruit ability? The slave king of the underworld roared with the utmost fury while looking at the sky, which was filled with green gale as far as the eye could see. He was so angry that his whole body was trembling. Are you done or not? Conqueror's haki. This was the ability he had always dreamed of. It was laughable to think that he had been a slave king in the underworld for decades, yet he lacked the Conqueror's haki that proved one's aptitude as a king. And now, this kid actually demonstrated right in front of him what it meant to awaken Conqueror's haki on the spot. He lay on the ground, opened his eyes, and boom, he had it. Uncontrollable envy, jealousy, and extreme hatred. That would have been fine, after all, newly awakened Conqueror's haki was like a gentle breeze to King Tlimican. Aside from affecting his mindset, it couldn't cause any real impact. But the second time he fell, after getting up, this kid's armament haki was actually evenly matched with his own. At that moment, he had only one thought in his heart: is this even possible? The most outrageous thing was this third time, which happened just 10 minutes ago. Dragon did another sit-up, and good heavens, the entire climate turned into a hurricane. The strength of the wind was so strong that it pushed back his sandstorm repeatedly. It had only just managed to stabilize. Although the Sand King was the native sandstorm of this island, the awakening of a Logia system devil fruit ability could permanently change the climate of an island. If this weren't a desert island, where the appearance of gale itself would stir up yellow sand to form a sandstorm, the Sand King would have died on the spot. Because the pet fruit's awakening ability was to turn a sandstorm into a pet, The Sand King's form was merely a manifestation-like existence. So, if the sandstorm itself disappeared due to climate change, there would naturally be no so-called manifestation or incarnation, effectively resolving the logic of the pet fruit ability from its root. For example, if Sakazuki came over and turned the entire island into an active volcano island, melting all the sand sea into scorched earth or something. Facing King Tlimiken's frantic roar and questioning, Dragon's mouth curved slightly, and a smile appeared on his usually indifferent face. He said, "Now, the battle is finally fair, isn't it?" Whoosh whoosh whoosh. As soon as the words fell, within the endless gale, a lifelike long green dragon with shimmering scales slowly emerged. It let out a high-pitched dragon roar, its majestic long body swimming through the air, looking down at the Sand King opposite it. This is the true Hurricane Dragon King. Chapter 66, Impel Down Level 5.5 Discovered. Outside the island, the arrival of the Doghead battleship had already been discovered by Rear Admiral Avane, who immediately came alone using Moonwalk to pay his respects to Vice Admiral Garp. At this moment, he was standing beside Rear Admiral Bogart, listening with a look of astonishment as the latter explained Dragon's situation. Suddenly, he raised his head and looked towards the sky above the island. Has the Hurricane Fruit ability undergone awakening? My heavens, didn't he just undergo Conqueror's Haki awakening before? Interestingly, even though Rear Admiral Avane and Rear Admiral Bogart hold the same military rank, the range of the former's observation Haki couldn't even sense Shabak City, while the latter seemed to do so with ease. Yes, although I've heard that Devil Fruit ability awakening has nothing to do with strength and completely depends on what's called opportunity, it is indeed astonishing that Rear Admiral Da'urag achieved awakening in just over a year. In such a situation, even the usually taciturn Bogart couldn't help but marvel. He then turned his gaze to Garp in front of him and smiled. Shouldn't I say, as expected of your son? Garp, upon hearing this, gave a shake head and said, "The Devil Fruit awakening is indeed unexpected, but that's not the key. He can't defeat that slave king with just that." "You mean?" Rear Admiral Avane, standing nearby, asked in confusion. "The key is that kid's heart is undergoing a transformation." Garp crossed his arms over his chest, and while sensing the changes in Dragon's Haki, he continued. "Before, because of those celestial dragons' trash and various forms of darkness, this kid's heart was filled with distress, anger, resentment, hesitation, and struggle. On top of that, his defection plan was intercepted on the spot. Honestly, if he continued like that, his Haki would get weaker and weaker, perhaps even becoming unusable one day, because his heart was no longer firm. Haki is a strength that originates from the heart, and also a strength of will. Only with a sufficiently firm will can one master Haki. At the same time, the firmness of one's will and the strength of one's inner heart determine the strength of their Haki." Rear Admiral Avane's face instantly turned pale upon hearing the first sentence from this important figure. He was frantically complaining in his heart, "What the hell? Who curses the celestial dragons like that to their face? Isn't that just courting death?" But Rear Admiral Bogart beside him didn't seem to care at all. Instead, he lowered his chin and mused. "You mean Rear Admiral Da'urag's inner heart is constantly growing stronger during battle, and this is the fundamental reason why he can come back from the dead every time?" "No." Garp gave a shake head again and said. "The change in his inner heart only makes his Haki stronger, which is key to defeating powerful opponents, but it's not what allows him to persevere until now." "Then?" Rear Admiral Bogart asked. "The body's potential." Garp calmly uttered these 5 words. "Although the strength of Haki originates from the heart, ultimately it's the materialization of the heart. Strength, fundamentally, is still substance, which is commonly referred to as stamina and life force. This kid dragon has been receiving my training of love since he was young. As early as when he was 10 years old, he had already turned life return into an instinct. By now, his level of control over his body far surpasses most life return practitioners, even you, Bogart. Coupled with the sufficient life force accumulated within his body, this is the strength that supports him in getting up again and again." After listening, Rear Admiral Bogart fell silent again, raising his gaze to continue watching the duel between the hurricane and the sandstorm. Rear Admiral Avane beside him also understood, wearing a look of sudden realization. So, it's his extraordinary stamina that provides the time for his Haki to continuously improve. For Rear Admiral Da'urag to defeat King Tlimiken, neither of these is dispensable. Garp nodded and smiled. "That's right. Whether it's Conqueror's Haki or Ability Awakening, these just look grand and spectacular, with an imposing aura. Even if he becomes a Logia user, that kid's strongest point is ultimately the martial arts I taught him since he was young. This is also the difference between him and Sakazuki and others." Following that, the marine hero was seen grinning proudly and smiling. "Just wait and see. This battle will be decided in at most another day, or even half a day, because Dragon can still last for 2 days, but that slave king cannot. However, there were still words in his heart that he didn't speak aloud. This battle will become the most important battle in Dragon's life. Personally defeating slave King Tlama, King Tlamakan, and saving hundreds of thousands of innocent slaves is enough to clear the negative emotions in his heart and solidify his inner justice. In terms of strength, after this battle, he will be on par with Sakazuki and Borsellino, perhaps even slightly superior. As for Kyuzen, he's still a bit behind. This made Garp consider whether he should get Dragon the title of Admiral candidate. However, this idea was immediately dismissed as soon as it appeared. Firstly, there are only 3 admiral positions, and he also quite likes this kid Kyuzen. Secondly, he feels that Dragon, like himself, wouldn't be willing to be an admiral, specifically cleaning up after those celestial dragons' trash. Although he heard that the 5 elders issued an order prohibiting celestial dragons leaving Mary Jo Eyes without permission, who can guarantee that no accidents will happen, or what if the prohibition is lifted someday? Looking at it this way, this brat will have to be a vice admiral for his whole life, just like this old man just then. A marine soldier ran over quickly, first saluted, and then gave a loud report, Vice Admiral Garp. The fleet admiral gives the order for you to return to Manafort immediately. There is an important mission to be executed. Oh? Garp turned around, raising an eyebrow. Rear Admiral Bogart beside him wondered what matter it could be, as it was rare for the fleet admiral to issue an order personally. Generally speaking, it was always Admiral Sengoku who would notify him in a discussive manner. The most recent mission he remembered was the one last year when he went to South Blue to capture Pirate King Roger. In the Grand Line, within the Great Undersea Prison, Impel Down, Magellan, currently the Vice Warden, was following Magellan Warden. They were currently inside an unremarkable floor. The reason it was called unremarkable was that this place had neither the sword mountains and grass blades of Crimson Hell, nor the high temperatures and coldness of Blazing Hell and Freezing Hell. There was nothing, it was just a very ordinary dim space. However, currently, there was a group of people claiming to be staff from the construction department, using tape measures to record the size data of various places. It was said that they were going to build some kind of research institute here. This place between the 5th and 6th floors, how could there be such a large area that we didn't know about? Magellan observed his surroundings in disbelief. Magellan Warden gave a bitter smile and said, I didn't expect it either. If Cypher Paul hadn't told me, I probably wouldn't have known until the day I retired that there was a so-called 5.5th floor within Impel Down, where I've lived my whole life. Not far away, Senior Director Coulson from the administrative department was seen accompanying a researcher wearing white coats, inspecting the surrounding situation. Professor Fritz, after the science unit reform, the Biochemical Research Institute will be located here. From now on, this place will be where all biochemical-related files and products are subject to research, experimentation, and storage. If human experimentation is needed for research, you can apply to the warden here for criminal subjects. Similarly, if there's an issue with bioweapon leakage, please seek help from them immediately. I believe Vice Warden Magellan will handle it well. He is a Parimsha system poison fruit ability user. Coulson said this while pointing in Magellan's direction. Professor Fritz nodded repeatedly with some excitement, saying good repeatedly. In his opinion, this place was simply the best secret research base. He truly couldn't think of a place safer, more secretive, and with more human body subjects than here. Also, the first mission of the Biochemical Research Institute will be to research an effective method to solve the Amber-Lee disease using biochemical means. You will see the files related to Amber-Lee disease shortly. As for the patients, they will be sent over gradually after the facilities here are completed. Master, what is Amber-Lee disease? Just as Professor Fritz was about to say something, a boy nearby, who seemed filled with excitement, came over and asked curiously. This person had a youthful face, but was nearly 2 meters tall, with a head of thick, shoulder-length hair, and even a pair of ram horns growing on his head. He didn't look like a normal human race. Professor Fritz looked helplessly at his 14-year-old student, but this kid's talent was truly outstanding, and he actually doted on him quite a bit. Calm down a bit, Caesar. Chapter 67, Lord Amu's Attendant Arrangements. Mary Jo Eyes, Hall of Authority. Hey, that kid Dragon actually defeated the Slave King. Didn't we all think the possibility wasn't high back then? Saint Shepherd Jupiter chuckled self-deprecatingly, shaking the intelligence he held. The intelligence stated that King Tlamakan had been officially arrested by the Marines and was being escorted to an ICE lobby for trial. As for the soldiers of the Slave Guard Legion, although they were controlled by the Pet Fruits ability, they had caused casualties to the Marines and could not be released without charge, so they were also brought back and imprisoned. Saint Ethenborough Venus Jiro held his Shodai Kaitetsu, looked over with a blank expression, and said, "Don't count me in. I said back then that since this is Lord Amu's decision, there would be no problem. Indeed, ultimately, we mortals still cannot deeply understand Lord Amu's foresight. From now on, it's best to put away such petty thoughts. St. Marcus Mars laughed heartily. On the other side, St. Jaga Ursha Saturn shook his head, saying, "It can't really be called petty thoughts." On the surface, Dragon's strength was indeed much weaker compared to King Tlimican. We were just worried, which is quite normal. Things like future sight, we all know aren't rare for high-end combatants, but that only predicts a few seconds. An ability like Lord Amu's, which seems capable of observing the entire river of time, is truly unheard of, a veritable miracle. Sitting in the center, St. Topman Warkery, who managed the entire political affairs department, gazed upwards fanatically. Although there was only a magnificent crystal chandelier and a ceiling, his worshipful gaze seemed to pierce through everything, looking up at the room of authority on the topmost floor. Saint Shepherd Jupiter nodded and said, "From this point of view, Lord Amu is preparing to heavily rely on Garp's son. But now that the 3 admiral candidates have been decided, how should he be arranged? Humphrey, as long as Lord Amu is willing, just replace one of them." Saint Ethenbrun Venusdro, however, didn't care about this, thinking it was just a minor matter. The other 4 looked at him and secretly shook their heads. This person was as always ignorant of politics, or rather, uninterested in it. Regarding Dragon's matter, Lord Amu surely has his own considerations, so let's not waste our time thinking about it. After speaking, St. Topman Warkery looked at the intelligence in his hand and continued. The Tutmos Kingdom has been confirmed to have its affiliation status cancelled. The administrative department is organizing fleets from various South Blue countries to disperse and settle the hundreds of thousands of slaves on the island. Afterwards, the Marines will be responsible for sending them back to their homeland. Interestingly, these rescued slaves, when questioned by reporters from major newspaper agencies, showed strong goodwill towards the world government and the Marines. St. Marcus Mars listened and said, "The news of the slave king's capture must have attracted attention from all sides now. Without a doubt, this matter will be the front-page headline of the next newspaper. But doing so is equivalent to putting our world government's intentions on the table. The royalty and nobility of various countries probably won't be at peace. It should be known that the main beneficiaries of the slave trade were not the celestial dragons, but the noble class of kingdoms large and small. Asking them to obediently release their slaves is equivalent to seizing their property, and the difficulty is definitely not small. Humphrey, what can they do if they're not at peace?" The agenda item for this reverie was personally set by Lord Amu. This means the agenda item will definitely pass smoothly. As long as the agenda item passes, they will have to obediently execute it. Disobedient? Refusing? The bridge over in East Blue hasn't been finished yet. St. Ethenbrun Venusdro once again made extremely strong remarks, his gaze chillingly indifferent. "That's true. Even if it causes quite a stir, we can just replace a batch of people to be the royalty of various countries when the time comes." St. Topman Warkery nodded in deep agreement. The 5 elders' conversation ultimately revolved around this reverie. As for Colonel Rose of the 194th Branch in South Blue being demoted and transferred, and the base commander of the 242nd Marine Branch Base, and the base commander of the 289th Marine Branch Base, being escorted to an ICE lobby along with King Tlimican on the grounds of collusion, bribery, and secretly informing King Tlimican, these matters were too small to even be worth mentioning. "Oh, right, how is the matter of faking Roger's treasure progressing?" St. Topman Warkery looked at St. Shepherd Jupiter and asked. The latter smiled. Although the process was a bit troublesome, Cypher Pol 6 agent did quite well this time. They managed to get it done with some minor scares. Now we just need to find it and bring it back. The former nodded, understanding St. Shepherd Jupiter's meaning. The situation in the New World Sea area was too complex. It was definitely not easy to create a fake there and keep it completely secret. How much treasure was put in? St. Jaga Ursha Saturn asked curiously from the side. This was because the Holy Land Treasury and Gold Vault were under the jurisdiction of the Political Affairs Department. This showed how immense the Political Affairs Department's authority was. St. Topman Warkery smiled slightly. Not much, just enough to fill 2 large cargo ships. To ensure the impact, there are no banknotes, only gold and jewels. Hearing this, the corners of the other 4-5 elders' mouths twitched. According to the plan, they needed to pile these found one piece together and then live broadcast it to the whole world via visual den mushi. What kind of scene would that be with so much treasure piled together? Now, the whole world will have their perspective broadened. I wonder what kind of expression the Roger Pirates' crewmates will have then. St. Shepherd Jupiter laughed heartily. Just then, St. Marcus Mars noticed a maid tiptoeing over. Seeing her, the other 4 also stopped laughing and shifted their gaze. Lord has ordered me to inform you that he wishes to take a walk in the surrounding area. If there is anything, please contact him directly using a transponder snail. Hearing this, the 5 elders seemed quite surprised. After the maid respectfully turned and left, Saint Topman Warcurry stroked his chin and said, "It seems Lord Imu is truly getting restless after being so still. That's also normal. Or rather, it's surprising that Lord has been living in seclusion up there for several hundred years." Saint Marcus Mars said. Saint Ethanbron Venus Giro pondered as he voiced his guess. "I think it's related to Lord Imu's prophecy. The Great War and Rebellion 24 years from now that can threaten our rule are enough to alarm Lord. Then what about the flying vehicle Lord Imu mentioned before?" Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn asked. "A method has been thought of and is being handled. Lord will not be disappointed when the time comes," Saint Marcus Mars said with full confidence, smiling. "That's good." Saint Topman Warcurry was very satisfied with the reply. He then looked at Saint Shepherd Jupiter and asked, "Have the accompanying Cipher Pol agents been selected?" "Yes, because Lord Imu requested to only bring 1 CP, I was troubled for a few days. Fortunately, I selected a candidate who is excellent in all aspects the day before yesterday," Saint Shepherd Jupiter said with a look of relief. "Male? Female? Female, and quite beautiful. Of course, the most important thing is a clear background and decent strength." At this point, Saint Ethanbron Venus Giro interjected, saying, "I heard the candidate for the accompanying attendant from the Marines is also a female. I've seen the files, her swordsmanship skill is quite good. In that case, adding the 2 maids responsible for daily life." Saint Jaga Ursha Saturn stroked the texture on his cane, asking worriedly, "Isn't the combat power too weak?" But at his words, Saint Ethanbron Venus Giro let out a chuckle and said, "Where in this world is there combat power that can threaten Lord Imu? These attendants are just there to do some trivial small matters for Lord, and also to relieve Lord's boredom and pass the time during the journey." Chapter 68, Imu's one-day trip on the Red Line. Im finally decided to step out of the treehouse and the room of authority, because he suddenly realized he seemed to have hit a dead end. He hadn't been to the 4 Seas, the White Sea, or the Grand Line, but wasn't the Red Line the same? Besides, ordinary people weren't even qualified to come up here. He could completely explore the Red Line first. Once he had explored enough, he believed it would also pass a lot of time. These days were truly unbearable. For someone who had only transmigrated for just over a year, not having a computer or a mobile phone was too difficult, and there was no one around he could chat with. Every day, besides practicing his sword, playing the zither, and reading reports, all that was left was looking up at the moon. So he walked out of Pangaea Castle, and even with unimaginable speed, he left the Holy Land Marijawais far behind him. By now, looking back, he couldn't even see a shadow of it. Ho! For some reason, Im let out a turbid breath as if relieved of a heavy burden, then immediately took a deep inhale, enjoying the incredibly fresh natural air. This wasn't to say he disliked staying in Marijawais, he just felt his body and mind relax. At least for a short time, he didn't have to pretend to be cold and indifferent, and he didn't have to worry about the world government's rule. Oh, so right next to Marijawais is an Automaria. Im glanced at the surrounding environment and smiled. He saw himself in a red world, with palm-sized red snow fluttering down from above, and the ground covered in thick red leaves. Looking out, the mountains and fields were filled with fiery red maple trees. Im walked leisurely through the forest, enjoying the embrace of the autumn wind and maple leaves, while recalling information about the Red Line. The situation on the Red Line was somewhat similar to the islands on the Grand Line. It didn't have the normal seasonal changes of the 4 Seas, but was composed of zones with different terrains and climates. Large zones spanned over 100 kilometers, while smaller ones were only a few dozen. So, if one walked on the Red Line and kept moving in one direction, they might find that the previous area was experiencing heavy snowfall, while the next area had a scorching sun and unbearable heat. Thinking about it, for people who love to travel, this must be like paradise, right? Actually, this wasn't strange, because back then, the Red Line was originally pieced together from islands on the Grand Line. The Holy Land Marijawais was a spring area, which was why the climate there was always bright and sunny, with flowers blooming. Ah, it would be nice to have someone to talk to right now. Im came to the edge of this autumn area, looking at the snowy landscape and ice mountains appearing before him, and muttered to himself. But then again, even if someone was with him, what could they talk about? With his current identity, it wasn't easy to find someone with common topics. As for someone he could talk to as an equal, that was just a thought. If such a person really appeared, he wasn't sure he'd actually be willing. He had also thought about finding a few beauties, but he always felt that with his current conditions, his standards for choosing a consort should be higher. He shouldn't be desperate, otherwise, not only would he lose face, but he would also have no style at all. Forget it, don't think about these insignificant matters. Women and such will come eventually, no need to rush. My future harem, as Lord Imu, must consist of the most top-tier beauties, preferably with somewhat arrogant personalities. Im tried hard to shift his attention away from women and began to think about how to utilize this red line. Although he seemed to want to escape pressure, deep down, he still couldn't let go of his concern for the ruling power. Such a large place, if people were migrated here, the population would definitely explode in a few decades. There's also a large amount of space for planting grain. Leaving it like this is too wasteful. In his opinion, placing most of the citizens on islands was not only very inconvenient to manage, with poor transportation, but also the living environment wasn't very safe. Large islands were one thing, but small islands facing typhoons, tsunamis, and the like at sea were truly a gamble with life. Who knew how many islanders died in these natural disasters every year? But living on the red line was different. Although the seasons in each zone were fixed, the stability was valuable. Moreover, the terrain here was extremely high, so there was no need to worry about tsunamis or anything similar. Population, population, population. Im kept repeating this word. Because he knew how important this was for the future world government. Just relying on the golden finger star chart and stargate he possessed. In the future, whether it was war or management, a vast population would definitely be needed. Although other worlds would also have residents. But in the early stages, they definitely couldn't be heavily relied upon on a large scale. The homeland's talent was the base. Walking in the vast snowy landscape, he suddenly stopped, because he felt bored again. Look around, although the scenery was good, not a single person could be seen. Occasionally, he could see snow rabbits and snow foxes scurrying around. Ultimately, he wasn't someone who liked to travel. He wanted to go outside and see, purely out of curiosity, to see interesting people and magical things. But the scenery on the red line now was too normal, too ordinary. So what did he like? Watching movies, watching anime, reading novels, playing games, eating delicious food, occasionally playing ball games, like table tennis, badminton, basketball, and so on. It seems that after the world situation stabilizes in the future, I still need to find a way to enrich the entertainment industry of this world. Suddenly, Im thought of someone, a little guy who dreamed of becoming a great singer, a great star, and loved grand spectacles. At this point in time, that kid should be on the Sabati archipelago. He's a seedling worth cultivating, but movies, games, and such are out of the question for now. However, sporting event can be tried. Im stroked his chin, pondering, while turning around and heading back the way he came, because he felt that sporting event were much more interesting than looking at unremarkable scenery. Isn't sport also a game? But I can't play by myself. Purr-upper-upper-oo. Just as he was thinking about what sport to try first when he returned, the transponder snail in his pocket rang. When he was out, only the 5 elders could call him on this one. Lord Imu, the attendants from Marine Headquarters and Cypher Paul have been confirmed. Would you like to meet them now, or wait until you depart? This voice belonged to the 5 elder with the mustache, whom Im was now extremely familiar with. Wait until I depart. Im replied calmly. But just as the other party received the answer and was about to end the call, he casually asked, what are their names? Lord, Marine Headquarters will send a Rear Admiral, female, named Jian. Although her strength is average, her appearance is top-notch, and she is skilled in all the arts of a geisha. We believe she will bring you pleasure during your journey. Jian. Im raised an eyebrow. It was indeed a familiar name, and the choice was quite good. What about the other one? It's Stussy, currently of Cypher Pal 9 agent. She also has a top-notch appearance and good strength, especially skilled in intelligence gathering and assassination. We believe she can handle many small matters for you. After hearing the identities of these 2 attendants, Im's interest greatly increased. He was feeling bored anyway, so he immediately said, have them come see me. Also, set up a tennis court and matching equipment near Pangaea Castle as quickly as possible. Yes. St. Topman Warkery, far away in Mary Joey's, was full of question marks, but he immediately agreed respectfully, then gently put back the handset and ended the call. Im became somewhat excited, a smile appearing on his face. Finally, something to play with. But the smile immediately faded, returning to his usual coldness and arrogance. The next second, he instantly disappeared from the spot, his entire being shooting towards Mary Joey's like an invisible lightning bolt. Thank you very much to the 3-legged cat reader for the 400 kitty and point tip. Bo. Thank you Black Cat Sanjiao Mao for your encouragement and support. This chapter is meant to show that the protagonist is not a tool character, but a living person, with his own joys, angers, sorrows, and delights. I personally still hope that the protagonist can be more vivid and have some growth potential, rather than always being a cold king sitting on the empty throne. After all, I myself am also an ordinary person, and I believe that everyone who reads this book is also an ordinary person. Therefore, while ensuring the protagonist maintains his external style, I will also write about his preferences and dislikes in various aspects. Chapter 69, Sengoku and Garp mobilize. At Marine Headquarters, Manaford, a unique doghead battleship was docked in the vast port, attracting the gaze of many passers-by. Bang, wahahaha, the old man is back. The door to the Fleet Admiral's office was pushed open forcefully, and Garp walked in unrestrained like a large crab, holding an open plastic bag of senbai in his hand. Ever since receiving Fleet Admiral Kong's order, he had returned directly, not waiting for Dragon and King Tlanikin to decide a winner. Firstly, he felt there must be a very important matter, and secondly, he had absolute confidence in his son. Having unleashed his full power, defeat was impossible. You. Kong glanced at the heavily damaged door, helplessly gave a shake head, and pretended not to see it. He couldn't remember how many times he had scolded Garp for knocking and gently pushing the door. You sit down first and look at the mission content. Sengoku, standing nearby, was not so polite. He immediately snapped at Garp as he sat down. Bastard, what were you running around for? Don't you know everyone was waiting for you? Got it. Garp took a piece of senbai and bit into it, then placed the bag beside him. He picked up the document that had been placed on the coffee table long ago, scratched his ear with his other hand, his face full of perfunctory attitude. This attitude caused the tendons on Sengoku's forehead to bulge, but in the end, he could only angrily slap the sofa and close his eyes, waiting for the other party to finish reading the document. Meanwhile, after reading the document, Garp's gaze was filled with nothing but astonishment. Ignoring the half-eaten senbai in his mouth, he suddenly looked at Fleet Admiral Kong behind the desk. Roger's treasure has been found? Isn't it all written there? It's said that Cypher Pol 6 agent found it in the New World, so the Five Elders ordered us to join forces with Cypher Pol 0 agent personnel to bring it back to Mary Joyce. And on the return trip, we have to conduct a public broadcast to the entire world. Hearing Fleet Admiral Kong's reply, Garp was still incredibly surprised. How is that possible? Possible or not, the mission is right in front of us. Let's bring it back first. Sengoku said, standing up after opening his eyes. The mission requires us to be as fast as possible. We'll depart now. Garp raised his head to look at him, complaining. The old man just got back, and I haven't even been sitting for 5 minutes. Can't you be considerate of this old man over 50? Bastard, I'm a year older than you. Sengoku gritted his teeth, clenched his fists, and glared fiercely. Garp was stunned, thinking to himself, yeah, I am a year younger than Sengoku. Thinking this, he felt too embarrassed to mention age again and stood up with a laugh. Look at you, why are you getting angry? Let's go. It's just going to the New World to get something, what's the big deal? Fleet Admiral Kong looked at his sloppy, foolish appearance and couldn't help but instruct him. Garp, be careful. It's said the amount of treasure is very large, possibly requiring 2 large cargo ships, and you'll have to cross half of the New World. You will definitely be attacked by many pirates along the way. You absolutely cannot make any mistakes. Garp grinned and laughed. With the old man and Sengoku leading the team, plus 5 vice admirals including Borsalino and Sakazuki, 10 headquarters warships, and Cypher Pol 0 agents secretly assisting, this combat power scale is useless even if Whitebeard comes. To be honest, this already exceeded the level of a conventional buster call, completely sufficient for a decisive battle at sea against any top-tier power. Now, it was just being used for an escort mission for a treasure, and he felt it was a bit of an overreaction. Sengoku frowned and snorted coldly. Roger's treasure, there's a high possibility that Whitebeard will make a move. Also Charlotte Linlin. If things get big, Kaido, who only knows about war all day, will likely force his way in. You need to stay alert. This concerns the reputation of our Marines and the entire world government. Indeed, thankfully Golden Lion Shiki has been dealt with. Otherwise, this escort mission would truly be quite risky. Fleet Admiral Kong felt a sense of relief. Fleet Admiral, we're departing. Sengoku didn't want to waste any more time. Go early and return early. Seeing that Sengoku ignored him and walked out of the office on his own, Garp didn't care either. He picked up the half bag of senbai remaining and swayed his body as he followed him out. Inside the office, Kong rubbed the back of his head in distress, deeply feeling that there were too few usable admirals under him. Sigh, when will Sakazuki and the others be able to take on major responsibilities? If this continues, this bastard will give me high blood pressure. But how did the world government find the One Piece? This question left him, the fleet admiral of the Marines, completely puzzled. Is Cypher Paul's intelligence-gathering ability really that terrifying? Just as the large fleet organized by Marine Headquarters was preparing to head to the New World Sea area. Over at the Holy Land Marriage-wise, in the social plaza within Pangaea Castle. Two great beauties, one in white and one in black, one tall and one short, were curiously examining the tennis court that had just been built in front of them less than 10 minutes ago. Beside it were racks holding various rackets, as well as black buckets filled with yellow tennis balls, and even ball pickers. These two were naturally Rear Admiral Giant of the Marines and Cypher Paul 9 agent member Stussy, who had been called over. Interestingly, they arrived here shortly after each other and hadn't even gotten to know each other when a group of construction workers rushed in and, with astonishing construction speed, transformed the area into a standard outdoor grass tennis court. Until now, with the workers gone, only the two of them were left standing there blankly. What is this? Giant, wearing a coat of justice and hot pants, took 2 steps forward with her long legs, curiously scanning the court separated by a net bag. A tennis court. Stussy, on the other hand, was wearing the agent uniform issued by Cypher Paul 9 agent, a black tight hip skirt paired with black mesh body stocking, looking even more sexiness and charm. It's just that the height difference between the two was quite large, or rather, Giant was too tall. What is tennis ball? Giant turned her head and asked in confusion. It wasn't that she was ignorant, but tennis ball, this thing, was such an obscure sport in this world that it couldn't be any more obscure. Of course, it was the same for any sport, as these things only occasionally appeared on a few relatively wealthy islands, mainly used by the nobility for amusement. You can just think of it as a plaything for active nobles. Stussy smiled slightly. As the most excellent Cypher Paul 9 agent, although she didn't play tennis often, she had a basic understanding of it. So that's how it is. This is likely ordered by that celestial dragon named Saint Nerona. Giant suddenly understood, her brow furrowing. But the mission I received was to follow and protect him during his travel. This was the mission content that Sister Tsuru herself had relayed, so she accepted it despite not liking celestial dragons. It was said that this celestial dragon was not an ordinary celestial dragon, but a high-ranking celestial dragon who was very likely to become one of the next 5 elders, so there was no room for refusal. Unless she didn't want to be a Marines anymore. Oh right, I'm Giant, and you? Stussy, with her beautiful golden hair, charmingly looked at Giant and smiled. I know you, the strongest female officer after Vice Admiral Tsuru. That blade on your waist is the famous sword Konpira, right? I'm Stussy, please take care of me from now on. Chapter 70, Lord Imu, the King of Tennis. You know me, but I know nothing about you. Isn't that a bit unfair? Giant looked down at Stussy and said jokingly. Judging from this mission, we'll be spending quite a bit of time together in the future. You'll learn what you need to learn. The other meaning behind Stussy's words was very clear. What you shouldn't know, you won't know. Giant didn't mind this. She continued to observe the tennis court before her, thinking about how to play tennis. But the next second, she composed her expression, and her beautiful eyes looked towards the 3 figures walking out from inside the city of Pangaea Castle. She directly overlooked the 2 maids wearing black and white dresses. Her focus was on the person leading them, a young gentleman wearing a white hat, white shirt, white trench coat, white pants, and white leather boots from head to toe, with black hair and black eyes. Could he be Saint Nerona? But this outfit. Giant tilted her head and spoke softly in confusion. It's not like she hadn't seen celestial dragons before. Their hair was always styled high, with the ends deliberately curled, looking particularly ridiculous. Their clothing was even more bizarre, with fat and wide white coats, and round bubbles worn on their heads. Honestly, the first time she saw a celestial dragon, she almost burst out laughing. Thankfully, she managed to hold it back in time, otherwise, she might have really caused trouble. Compared to them, this person in front of her. She thought he was quite handsome, completely lacking any trace of the celestial dragon style. This was also because Giant hadn't seen the 5 elders. If she had, she would know that high-ranking celestial dragons wouldn't dress so ridiculously at all. Stussy, who was beside her, was also observing the other party, but her expression was much more respectful and cautious, unlike Giant, who was so blatant. Because she had witnessed more of the terrifying aspects of the celestial dragons than Giant. Esteemed Saint Nerona, I am Stussy of Cypher Paul 9 agent. I will be responsible for your bodyguard duties for the foreseeable future. Seeing Stussy finish her self-introduction, Giant also immediately stated her name and identity. At the same time, Imu was also observing the 2 of them. His first impression wasn't beauty. After all, he had seen countless beauties in his previous life, so he wouldn't be stunned by mere beauty, or rather, their appearance wasn't enough to do so. Perhaps, the future Hancock and Princess Shira Hoshi might have that potential. Compared to that, the height difference between the 2 was more eye-catching. Jian was estimated to be nearly 3 meters tall, while Stussy was estimated to be 1.8 meters. When they stood together, the latter's head only reached the former's waist level. However, their body proportion was excellent, and each had their own characteristic. One had blonde hair and a black dress, fully displaying Western sexiness and charm. The other had pink clothes and black hair, with a gentle face, possessing the gentle charm of an Eastern woman. As for him, his height was around 2 meters. He was quite satisfied with this data. A height of 2 meters in this world is equivalent to 1.8 meters in his previous life society, which is quite perfect. Any taller, and in his opinion, it would be a bit exaggerated and strange. If he were given the standard height of a Marine Admiral, he wouldn't be happy about it. Therefore, between these two beauties, Jian and Stussy, Imu personally preferred the latter a bit more. At least he wouldn't have to raise his head when speaking. "Do you play tennis?" After a simple introduction, Imu walked to the racket stand, choosing one while asking casually. Because he was currently using his second identity, his expression was no longer so cold and ruthless, but had a touch more gentleness. However, he still gave off a feeling of cold arrogance. "No." Jian gave a shake head. "I've learned a bit, but I haven't played for a long time." Stussy smiled slightly. "Is that so? Then play a few balls with me. Rear Admiral Jian can watch from the side first. I believe you'll understand after watching for a while." Imu chose a racket and walked into the court, picking up a tennis ball from the ball bucket along the way. He didn't actually play often, but with his super memory and absolute control over his body, he figured he would quickly become proficient. Previously, Imu had considered other sporting events, such as basketball, soccer, table tennis, badminton, and so on. However, the former two required quite a few people, while the latter two didn't feel like they had enough sense of power. With his current strong body, it wouldn't be satisfying to play. He also heard that the attendants chosen for him were Jian and Stussy, so he immediately decided to play tennis. Okay, Stussy didn't mind Saint Nerona's forceful order. In her opinion, celestial dragons were always like this, or rather, this attitude was already quite good. However, Jian had a bit of an opinion. She said, "Lord Saint Nerona, aren't you supposed to need guards because you're going to travel?" She felt she wasn't here to play with him. Wouldn't it be better to spend this time practicing her swordsmanship? The vehicle for travel isn't ready yet. Before that, let's familiarize ourselves with each other, and incidentally, play tennis with me. This is your mission. Imu completely disregarded Jian's resistant mood. If she insisted on not playing with him, he would just directly order the 5 elders to replace her. If she couldn't even handle this little matter, what was she good for? As he spoke, he walked to one end of the court, gently bouncing the tennis ball in his hand on the grass clump. At the same time, his gaze fell upon Stussy, who had picked up a racket and was ready at the other end. Honestly, playing tennis with a beauty agent wearing a black short skirt and black threads was somewhat interesting. This made Imu, who had been barred for too long, feel a bit of excitement. Finally, something to play with. The next moment, Imu slowly raised his right hand, lightly tossed the tennis ball in his palm upwards, then bent his knees, arched his back, jumped up, and swung the racket in his right hand. His entire serving motion was very smooth and done in one go. It was completely impossible to tell that he was actually an amateur before. However, because it was the first ball, he held back most of his strength. Firstly, he was worried about using too much force and sending it directly out of the court. Secondly, he wanted to avoid killing Stussy on the spot. Thirdly, he didn't want to cause excessive destruction. After all, he just wanted to play. Swoosh, yet, despite that, the racket he swung became an afterimage. With a loud noise, the tennis ball turned into a yellow beam that streaked across the net. Visible air currents spread outwards following its flight path. Bang! Stussy didn't have time to make any reaction at all. The beam landed directly inside the court not far away, kicking up large patches of broken grass clumps. The surging wind waves caused her blonde hair to dance wildly. This scene also startled Jian, making her hold back the words of inquiry in her mouth. She stared blankly with her mouth agape at the yellow tennis ball emitting white smoke from the pit. So strong. Whether it was her or Stussy in the court, both were stunned by the ball Imu hit. They truly didn't expect a celestial dragon they were supposed to protect could possess such strength. Looks like I need to reduce the force a bit more. Standing on the other half court, Imu gave a shake head somewhat dissatisfiedly at this scene. He still used too much strength. He wanted to have a relatively normal tennis match with Stussy. I'll serve a few more balls next. See if you can return any. Okay. Stussy smoothed down her bangs, which were messed up by the wind. Her mindset finally became serious. At the same time, she wondered who exactly this Saint Nerona was, thinking to herself. No wonder he was chosen as the successor to the 5 elders. He really is completely different from ordinary celestial dragons. The next second, it was served again from the opposite side. However, this time the ball's speed was much more normal. Although it was still comparable to lightning, it was enough for Stussy to reach the ball drop point and barely managed to hit it back. Stussy rubbed her palm, which was numb from the ball, and said coquettishly, "Lord Saint Nerona, a little wider please, I can't take it." Chapter 71, Father and Son of a Certain South Blue Nation. Although the latest issue of the major newspaper agency's newspapers has not yet been released, the matter of the slave king being arrested has already begun to gradually ferment among the high-level officials of the South Blue Nations. Undercurrents are surging back and forth through communication via transponder snail. Because when it comes to the prosperity of the slave trade, South Blue is undoubtedly the first among the 4 seas. Of course, this is also inseparably related to King Tlamakin having worked diligently here for decades and made outstanding contributions to the development of the slave trade. The mafia of West Blue and the slave owners of South Blue are the biggest characteristics of these 2 sea areas. The latter therefore has relatively developed heavy industry, while the former's light industry is more prosperous. The Yanad Kingdom is just such a typical South Blue nation. At this time, a young, handsome youth with golden curly hair, wearing blue and gold noble formal attire, stepped onto the stairs under the gaze of guards holding muskets on both sides, walking towards the royal palace hall built from large white stones. Royal Father. The youth maintained an elegant pace as he walked into the main hall, respectfully performing a courtesy towards the middle-aged man seated upon the throne. "Pericles, you're finally here, quickly come and look at this." This king wore a golden crown inlaid with sapphires on his head. As soon as he saw his eldest son arrive, his originally heavy and serious expression immediately revealed joy. He then directly stood up and walked down from the high platform, handing over the intelligence report in his hand. "Okay, please wait a moment." This prince of the Yanad Kingdom took the report with a smile and read it carefully. But as he read, his expression became similar to the king's earlier. Then he raised his head and said, "Royal Father, regarding the matter of the Tutmos Kingdom, I think we cannot just look at the surface. This represents that the world government is going to take big actions regarding the slave trade." "Yes, I also thought of this point. This world government, I don't know what's going on, something that has been tolerated for hundreds of years, they just change their attitude on a whim." The king complained, rubbing his brow. If it were in the past, he believed that even if King Tlamakin's identity was exposed, the world government would not allow the Marines to easily touch him. But now, without any warning, they directly arrested him. This matter has a great impact on South Blue, and an even greater impact on our Yanad Kingdom, Prince Pericles said, while repeatedly looking at the content of the report in his hand. Their nation has always purchased slaves through various channels, with slaves responsible for producing light industry goods in factories. Then, using the income from sales, a portion of funds is allocated for the slaves' food and replenishment. The rest is used for the operation of various aspects within the nation, as well as paying the annual heavenly tribute. Through this method, they liberated all citizens from their living burdens and vigorously cultivated the management talents of the citizens. Citizens only need to improve their knowledge, research hobbies, and exercise their bodies. This is considered the national policy of the Yanad Kingdom. Successive kings have all governed the nation in this way. Because they discovered that the effect of this approach is very good, the citizens living in a prosperous, comfortable, relaxed, and tidy environment naturally wholeheartedly support their own royalty. Thus, they became one of the very few royalty among the world nations that have continued their rule for hundreds of years. Also because they had a successful template, many nations in South Blue competed in imitation, with most even going to greater extremes. Rumor has it there is a kingdom called Saint Margaret, whose royalty and nobility directly turned all citizens into slaves. Not only did they use them as cheap labor force, but they also secretly sold them as goods when needed. Prince Pericles said to the king, "If the world government is truly going to crack down hard on the slave trade, and even strictly prohibit the existence of slaves, then we must prepare in all aspects." Actually, news is circulating recently within the noble circle, saying that at the reverie that is about to be held this year, the 5 elders will propose the total slave ban as an agenda item. The king walked back and forth in distress and continued to say, "Before, I didn't take it seriously, thinking this was just a ridiculous rumor. But now that the slave king has been arrested, I have to be cautious." Hearing this, Prince Pericles frowned, looking at the king's restless figure, and raised his voice to remind him, "Calm down, royal father." The latter was startled and also realized he had lost his composure. He gave a shake head and said with a bitter smile, "Now I truly don't know what to do. Without slaves, what will become of our kingdom? And furthermore." As he spoke the last part, the king showed a hesitant expression. Prince Pericles asked doubtfully, "Furthermore what?" "Ah, I'll just tell you. Margaret too from the Saint Margaret Kingdom just called me, hoping our Yanad Kingdom can join their alliance." "Alliance?" Prince Pericles immediately felt a bad premonition in his heart and quickly pressed for details. Please explain in detail, what does he want to do? The king walked onto the platform and sat back on the throne somewhat tiredly. He said to his eldest son below the platform, he is preparing to secretly establish a South Blue alliance, saying that if the reverie this year proceeds as usual, then so be it. But if the decision for a total slave ban is truly passed, then they will respond as an alliance. They want to challenge the world government? Prince Pericles opened his mouth, looking at the king in shock. No, Margaret to us, meaning is they will not openly resist and will avoid conflict as much as possible. However, the matter of banning slaves will be treated as non-existent within the alliance. Their attitude towards the world government is to delay as much as possible. If they are truly pushed to the brink in the end, then they will confront them with the alliance army of the world nations. Prince Pericles was silent for a moment and said, then did you join? No, I just told him I needed to consider it. Isn't this why I'm distressed about this matter? The king gave a shake head and a bitter smile. Then are you willing to hear your son's opinion? I called you here precisely because I wanted to ask for your thoughts. The king looked at Prince Pericles expectantly, because he knew deeply that the other party was far more outstanding than himself. The latter raised his head and said resolutely, then my opinion is to refuse, because this is an extremely foolish path to death, a path to extermination, and even a path to national ruin. The king was stunned upon hearing this, while Prince Pericles' statement continued. Back then, the German kingdom, how strong it was. It even dominated the entire North Blue Sea area. The kingdoms willing to be attendants added up to more than 20. But what was the result? 66 days, just 66 days, they were completely crushed by the marine fleet sent by the world government. The so-called South Blue Alliance, composed of merely a few kingdoms, how many days can it last? The king nodded subconsciously after listening, but still felt unwilling in his heart and hesitated. Then what about the slaves? Our kingdom cannot be without slaves. Royal father, severe injury and death, which is lighter and which is heavier? Prince Pericles shouted loudly, release the slaves, we can hire people with money. Moreover, our treatment of slaves is not harsh, providing basic guarantees for food, drink, clothing, and housing, and there is no arbitrary whipping. I believe some people will be willing to stay and work. Even if not, doing this will be uncomfortable for at most a few years or 10 years, we can slowly adjust. But if we confront the world government, the best result is to go to East Blue to bridge building with all the citizens. It was the first time the king had seen his eldest son so agitated. He suddenly smiled and said, Pericles, tell me the truth. If I had just told you that I decided to join the South Blue Alliance, what would you do? Prince Pericles was startled. After a moment of silence, he said softly, I will leave alone tonight, then change my name and find a way to join the Marines. The king's mouth twitched. He asked, you wouldn't try to persuade your royal father? Good words are hard to persuade a damned ghost. Since the decision is made, there is no need for more words. Chapter 72, The Slave King's Choice. Almost there, right? Dragon pushed open the cabin door and walked out, asking Rear Admiral Avane, who was looking out at the sea on the deck. By now, the 5 headquarters warships he led had already returned from the South Blue to the first half of the Grand Line. Judging by the time, they were close. Rear Admiral Da'urag, you suffered such heavy injuries, you should rest more. Rear Admiral Avane smiled. Leave the matter of handing over the prisoner to Impel down to me. No, I said before that I would personally escort the Slave King in. Dragon walked over to Rear Admiral Avane's side, looked at the gate of justice appearing in the distance, and said, this holds deep significance for me. Since you put it that way, alright. Then later, I'll escort Colonel Hansa and Colonel Will to a nice lobby for trial, and then how about we meet up again in Marineford for a drink? After the battle in the Tutmos Kingdom, Rear Admiral Avane's attitude towards Dragon became more respectful and awe-filled. On one hand, the strength the latter displayed completely convinced him, on the other hand, he would definitely be promoted to Vice Admiral after returning this time. Alright. Dragon didn't mind either, he actually quite liked drinking alcohol. Just then, another white-clothed masked person silently walked out from the cabin. This person just silently stood in a corner after coming onto the deck. Rear Admiral Avane glanced over and asked in a low voice, how much longer will these Cypher Pol agents follow you? He knew that on another warship nearby, there was another white-clothed masked person. These two, one close and one far, were keeping a close eye on Dragon. Don't worry about them. When it's time for them to disappear, they naturally will. Dragon had no interest whatsoever in looking back, because he had already dismissed the idea of defecting from the Marines and was preparing to see the subsequent changes in the world government and the Marines. Frankly, this mission had allowed him to fight to his heart's content and also allowed him to see a glimmer of hope. Half an hour later, The gate of justice slowly opened. The 5 warships immediately went their separate ways. Dragon led one ship following the sea current on the left towards Impel Down, while Rear Admiral Avane took the remaining 4 ships, quickly heading towards Sinai's lobby following the sea current on the right, and then returning to Marineford. This was the triangle current formed by 3 gates of justice connecting a giant whirlpool. Its flow speed was quite fast. Dragon's warship arrived outside Impel Down's Great Gate in less than 10 minutes. Immediately after, 2 headquarters lieutenant commanders wearing coats of justice were seen bringing King Tlimican out from the cabin's prison cell, escorting him onto the warship's deck. This former slave king of the underworld, at this time, had his hands bound by sea-stone handcuffs. His steps as he walked looked very weak. After all, the injuries on his body size hadn't fully recovered, and his mood was even worse. I told you that justice would definitely triumph over evil, and I would personally send you into Impel Down. Now, it's all done. Facing King Tlimican's fierce gaze, Dragon said calmly while meeting his gaze. King Tlimican gritted his teeth but was unable to speak. Therefore, his mood at this time was extremely complex, having the feeling of wanting to say something but not knowing how to open his mouth. If one had to describe it simply and clearly, it would probably be that he wanted to roar at Dragon, "You motherfucker are cheating." But now, this extremely frustrated slave king, frustrated to the point his lungs felt like they would explode, could only pant heavily without saying a word. As for cursing loudly or anything like that, he had already cursed plenty on the way here over the past few days. He was already tired of cursing. The entire handover process was very smooth. Because the identity of this prisoner was special, Warden Magellan personally came out to receive him. And among the jailer team behind him, the figure of Gecko Moria could also be seen. His enormous body size was indeed too obvious. Speaking of Moria these days, he was truly much more relaxed. Because a few days ago, for some unknown situation, the warden stopped him from continuing to cut the shadows of the prisoners on the underground level 4 and even demanded that he put all the shadows back. To be honest, at first, he was very angry and unwilling. That was the result of his hard work for a long time. Now he was being told to release them all. Wouldn't all that previous time be wasted? And he also felt like he had been played. Therefore, his short temper immediately flared up and he pushed back, not backing down at all because of the other party's identity as the warden. He directly adopted the posture of, "If you don't give me an explanation, I'll just start fighting." Gecko Moria's idea was very simple. He had agreed to be a jailer here for the world government, but he hadn't agreed not to beat up the warden, right? As long as he stayed in Impel Down after beating him up, then he wouldn't be breaking the contract. Fortunately, Magellan said to him, "Who has the leisure to mess with you? It's that the people above have other uses for these prisoners on the underground level 4, so they can't be without their shadows. Besides, when are you going to finish cutting the shadows of these hundreds of thousands of prisoners? Don't you get tired?" Gecko Moria thought about it then and indeed, he felt it made some sense. Although the previous time was wasted, wouldn't all the future time be saved? So he happily accepted this explanation. His current job changed to cutting the shadows of heavy criminals with bounties over 100 million in level 5, freezing hell, and level 6, eternal hell. However, the cut shadows needed to be handed over and stored in the warden's office on level 4, blazing hell. This greatly reduced his workload, and he finished in 2 days. Normally, he only needed to patrol back and forth, occasionally sending some food to his colleagues in the prison cells and chatting with them. The reason he came out this time was mainly because this slave King Tlama would be imprisoned in level 6, eternal hell, so he needed to conveniently cut off his shadow. After the person was handed over to Impel Down, Dragon turned and left, heading to Marineford to report. Meanwhile, King Tlimican was directly thrown into 100-degree boiling water for sterilization and disinfection, which was the so-called baptism. However, with his strength, he could just grit his teeth and get through it. It was equivalent to an ordinary person taking a rather hot bath, then changing into the uniform zebra-striped prison uniform, and then having a sea-stone leg cuffs added to his feet. After Moria walked over holding the large scissors and cut off the shadow, the basic process was considered complete. Finally, taking the internal elevator, he was directly escorted to the lowest level, Infinite Hell. Under the gaze of Warden Magellan and several jailers behind him, he slowly walked into his own prison cell. Just then, Warden Magellan raised his hand and waved, telling the jailers to leave on their own. He then walked into King Tlimican's prison cell himself. "You?" The latter turned around and became wary. Warden Magellan chuckled and said, "Don't be nervous, let's chat for a bit." "Chat about what? I don't recall us knowing each other before, right?" King Tlimican remained vigilant. The former asked with a smile. "Don't you think the prisoners here are missing something?" King Tlimican was full of questions. He furrowed his brow and lowered his voice. "What exactly do you want to say?" Inside the dark prison cell, the Slave King and the impelled-down warden were confronting each other, only the atmosphere was somewhat eerie. I'll give you two choices. 1. Continue being a prisoner here. 2. Come out with me and become a jailer. How about it? It shouldn't be a difficult choice, right? Warden Magellan smiled. What? King Tlamakin was stunned and immediately understood what the other party meant by saying the prisoners here were missing something. You're interested in my pet fruit ability and want me to put pet rings on the prisoners here. Warden Magellan nodded. Correct. What is your decision? This is indeed not a difficult choice. King Tlamakin laughed. Compared to staying in the prison cell all the time reading newspapers, moving around in the corridor outside would definitely be more comfortable. I accept. But shouldn't this shadow be returned to me? Without this shadow, he always felt something wasn't right. He didn't think Impel Down would cut off people's shadows for no reason, it must have some use. Warden Magellan glanced at the empty ground beneath his feet and smiled. You'll have to talk about that with your colleagues, Gecko Moria. After all, he is the shadow fruit user. Gecko Moria. This Slave King recalled the tall figure who had cut off his shadow on the sea surface level. It seems he'll have to find an opportunity to ask. From now on, the process for heavy criminals in Impel Down will have one step added: baptism, shadow cutting, ringing. Chapter 73, Jinbi arrives at Maniford. On Rear Admiral Da'urag's side, the warship slowly sailed into the port of Maniford. The atmosphere here was as lively as ever, with dozens of large warships lined up. Marines of all ranks came and went, up and down. The plaza, large enough to accommodate hundreds of thousands in battle, didn't feel empty at all. In the distance, the massive and magnificent Fortress of Justice overlooked everything like a king. Temporarily detain those pirates. I'll go talk to the fleet admiral about this first. Rear Admiral Da'urag instructed a major behind him. Yes, sir. Just as the major turned to head to the cabin to handle things, Rear Admiral Da'urag's gaze stopped on another moored warship not far away. There, many Marines were gathered. If viewed from the plaza at eye level, one probably wouldn't see anything, but standing on the deck of his warship and looking down, he could clearly see the situation inside. Fishmen? Mermaids? Indeed, he saw male fishmen walking down from that warship in a line, seemingly over 100 of them. Among them were also a few beautiful ladies. If not for their clothing, which was full of the exotic style of Fishman Island, they would have looked no different from human women. Wow, is this Marine headquarters? It's so big. Kana, with her flowing blue hair, grabbed her companion's arm excitedly and laughed as she stepped onto the ground of the plaza. Yeah, everything here is so big. The buildings are big, the plaza is big, the ships are big, look. There are super tall people over there. Ivani, whose arm was being shaken back and forth, was equally excited. Her beautiful eyes swept over the Fortress of Justice and the plaza, finally stopping on a giant race vice admiral passing by in the distance. Her mouth instantly dropped open. To them, the giant race were practically legendary beings. Ah, they're so beautiful. Are they mermaids? Mermaids from fairy tales. I can actually see them with my own eyes one day, and from such a close distance. The surrounding Marine soldiers also had shining eyes at this moment. Their gazes, like high-definition cameras, automatically ignored the strange and varied fishmen and firmly fixated on the few mermaid girls, who numbered only 5 after counting. For a time, the three groups of humans, mermaids, and fishmen looked each other over, making the scene quite interesting. But why did Vice Admiral Aokiji bring so many fishmen? In the crowd of Marines, a captain looked at Kuzan in the court with confusion. Maybe he brought them for a tour. I think that's possible, but are you sure he didn't bring them for us to look at? Just then, Rear Admiral Da'urag walked over. Wherever he went, Marines of all ranks made way for him. Now, the entire Marine headquarters knew that this son of Vice Admiral Garp was also a Logia user and was destined to be a prominent figure in the future. However, the latest newspaper wouldn't be released for another 2 days, so they still didn't know about the capture of the Slave King. Kuzan, what's the situation with these fishmen? As Rear Admiral Da'urag asked, he glanced at Jinbi and Aladdin beside Kuzan, because their aura was the strongest. Looking at your situation, you must have just returned after finishing your mission. Kuzan showed a smile. He was quite familiar with Rear Admiral Da'urag, after all, he had followed Garp for a while before, so their relationship was quite good. They are the first batch of Fishman tribe and Merfolk tribe to join the Marines. This is Lieutenant Colonel Jinbi, who will be the commander of the Fishman unit in the future, and this is Major Aladdin, the deputy commander. After speaking, Kuzan introduced Rear Admiral Da'urag to Jinbi and Aladdin, smiling. This is Rear Admiral Da'urag, the son of Vice Admiral Garp, and he's also a Logia user. Hello, Rear Admiral Da'urag, please give us more guidance in the future. Jinbi spoke as a representative to greet him. Hello. Rear Admiral Da'urag nodded with some surprise, then looked at Kuzan with a questioning gaze. The latter scratched the back of his head and smiled as he briefly explained the cooperation details between the world government and Fishman Island. This was no longer something that needed to be kept secret. The fleet admiral would inform the whole army about the Fishmen later. Setting up Sabati Archipelago as a Fishman safety zone, allowing the Sea King army to base and patrol there, the Marines also establishing a marine branch on Fishman Island, and inviting 200 Fishman tribe and Merfolk tribe members to join the Marines. Rear Admiral Da'urag quickly reviewed the important information in his mind. The more he thought about it, the more surprised he became. Combined with his mission to capture the Slave King this time, it was clear that the world government was going to take drastic measures to rectify the slave issue. But he was still confused. What had happened to the world government? Why had it suddenly changed so much that he almost didn't recognize it? So the Sea King army is now stationed on Sabati Archipelago? Yes, they set off with us and should have arrived by now. From now on, Area 62 there will be the exclusive base for the Sea King army, conveniently adjacent to our Navy base there. While Kuzan and Rear Admiral Da'urag were chatting, the surrounding crowd of Marines parted again, and the opening was even wider. A middle-aged female vice admiral with a dark blue ponytail led a team of female officers over. Long time no see, Vice Admiral Tsuru Kuzan saw the newcomer and quickly walked 2 steps to greet her. Rear Admiral Da'urag also followed closely and respectfully greeted her. Hello. Is that so? It hasn't been long, but after you go back this time, it will indeed be a while before we see each other again. Vice Admiral Tsuru said gently to Kuzan, then looked at Rear Admiral Da'urag and smiled. You worked hard on this mission. You did very well. Hurry up and go in, Fleet Admiral Kong is waiting for you. Yes, sir. Rear Admiral Da'urag nodded and didn't linger any longer, quickly walking towards the incredibly magnificent Fortress of Justice. After arriving at the headquarters, most ability users would consciously refrain from using their ability and Navy 6 styles. This was both to show respect for Manafort and for basic order. Otherwise, it would be too noisy and chaotic. I do need to go back as soon as possible. The situation on Fishman Island isn't very good. Pirates break in almost every day, especially pirates from the New World, who are the most troublesome. As soon as he mentioned this, Kuzan showed a troubled expression. He hadn't slept well the past 2 nights because many clever pirates chose to make their move at night. That's nothing yet. If those great pirates happen to pass by Fishman Island one day, then you'll really be facing big trouble. Vice Admiral Tsuru reminded him and instructed. You must handle things carefully there, especially your own strength training. Don't slack off, and reach Admiral level combat power as soon as possible. I understand all of this. Kuzan listened to Vice Admiral Tsuru's earnest words and enjoyed the feeling very much. He had been alone and helpless since childhood, experiencing picking up scraps and stealing things to survive. Fortunately, he was lucky enough to meet Tsuru when she was young and serving at the South Blue Branch. He was then brought to a Navy base to be raised and educated, finally having a good living environment, which also gave him extremely high enthusiasm for the Marines. Therefore, to Kuzan, Vice Admiral Tsuru was essentially no different from a foster mother. Vice Admiral Tsuru began to talk about serious matters. Alright, I'll take care of these mermaids. They will join the female soldier unit in the future. As for the Fishman tribe, you take them to Building C in the dormitory area. The specific positions will be officially notified by the Fleet Admiral later. Yes, sir. Kuzan naturally had no opinion. He casually asked with a smile. Is Teacher Zephyr here? I brought some specialty product alcohol from Fishman Island and wanted to have a drink with him. What a coincidence, he just came back last night with this year's cadets. Hurry and go. Oh right, take them to the dormitory first, this is serious business. Okay, you can rest assured, I won't delay. Kuzan replied with a chuckle. Jinbi and Aladdin, along with the nearly 200 fishmen beside them, were currently looking around at the environment and looking forward to the future in their hearts. The Fishman tribe was finally about to integrate into the human world. Chapter 74, The Tumultuous Nations of North Blue. Bang, a roar echoed on the ground, blasting apart large patches of grass clump and soil. A yellow glint shot out from the dust. The next moment, a white figure appeared in the court with a sharp whoosh, actually sending the glint back. Instant transmission. As a delicate shout emerged in the court, the black figure on the other end turned into an afterimage and vanished from the spot, instantly appearing before the yellow glint. Boom, the beam slammed fiercely onto the mesh racket. The intense spin and force created a crackling friction sound, gradually showing a visible dent. Invisible air current continuously overflowed between the ball and the net, and the strong wind it stirred up caused the surrounding grass and her golden hair to dance wildly. The force has increased by another point. Stussy felt the constant pressure from her hands and gritted her teeth, changing from a single-handed grip to a two-handed grip to hit the ball back. The orange-yellow beam reappeared, carrying a howling roar, instantly crossing the net in the middle and flying towards high altitude. Good shot. On the half-court at the other end, Jian, covered in sweat, shouted excitedly. Strength gathered in her pair of super-long legs, and her whole body leaped high. The muscles in her fair arms immediately bulged as she forcefully received the strong air current wrapped around the ball, smashing it down heavily. Bang! Stussy's pair of sexy beautiful legs, wearing mesh black stockings, moved rapidly, dragging streaks of afterimage behind her. At a speed unimaginable to ordinary people, she received the tennis ball just before it landed. At the same time, a black luster covered her racket, easily hitting back Jian's spike. The latter's face changed when she saw this scene in the air. "You're finally using hockey." Instant transmission. She stomped hard on a clump of air that turned into white mist, vanishing from the air. The next second, she had already appeared on the ground. Jian's observation hockey tightly locked onto the direction of the incoming beam, while simultaneously reinforcing her racket with armament hockey to counterattack. The two elite ladies, one from Marine headquarters and the other from Cypher Pole, finally started getting serious. They ran on their respective half-courts, turning into dazzling afterimages. The tennis ball, transformed into a yellow glint, constantly flew back and forth between the figures, drawing slender trajectories in the air. If it were an ordinary person, even with wide eyes, it would be difficult to keep up with the speed of the three, let alone know which side had the advantage in the court. The only thing they could feel was the incessant, deafening sound of the ball being struck. Fortunately, half reclining on a beach chair, was not an ordinary person. Through his ripple eyes under his invisible contact lenses, he could see all the detailed movements of the two, like an ultra-high-definition camera. As expected, Jian's strength is greater. The strength, speed, and reaction of a great swordsman are fully displayed, even when they play tennis. Speaking of which, Jian was initially resistant to play tennis itself, but after learning it and playing a few balls, she became engrossed. This sport, which allowed her to utilize all aspects of her strength, gave this girl, who had grown up in Marineford since childhood, a strong sense of fun. Especially since her opponent was Cypher Pole 9 agent, also a woman, her competitive spirit was immediately aroused. This resulted in didn't play tennis much these past 2 days, instead watching the two women scheme and compete on the court, using tennis ball to decide a winner. To be honest, watching beautiful women play tennis was indeed a pleasant experience. TSK, how nice, this is what you call a comfortable life. Held a crystal cup and took a sip of the bright red wine liquid in the cup, squinting his eyes as he enjoyed the killing tennis before him. This tennis ball is a good thing. It should be promoted in the future. North Blue. While was enjoying the peaceful years in Holy Land Marie Joais, sea ships bearing the world government symbol were active among various islands. This made the nobility of the various nations in North Blue, who had focused their attention on South Blue due to the Slave King incident, nervous. They always felt that the world government had been a bit restless recently. Doffy. On Spider Miles Island, Doflamingo, who was studying the world map in the room, heard a series of exclamations from Treble outside the door. When he looked up, the other party happened to push the door open and walk in. Treble was seen wearing a sticky-looking blue thick cloak that dragged on the ground, holding a golden cane as he walked in, with eye-catching black ankle chains. "What's wrong?" "Speak slowly." "Doffy, the world government's ship has arrived here. It's currently docked at the port." Hearing this, Doflamingo, who had sat back on the sofa, frowned and said, "Could it be to pick people up for this year's reverie?" "That's not right. I remember there's only a mayor on this island, no king. Did you find out their purpose for coming here?" If it were before, he might have thought they were targeting the Don Quixote family, but now he was one of the 7 warlords of the sea. Although this identity couldn't be publicly revealed, it guaranteed that he wouldn't be captured by the world government and Marines again. Thinking of this, he glanced at the X-shaped wristband on his right-hand wrist. "I asked." News came from the mayor's office that the world government wants to take away a batch of excellent financial personnel. Treble said, panting. "Financial personnel?" Doflamingo raised his head in surprise, then looked through the window towards the depths of the island, and then turned back to ask, "How many people do they want to take away?" "Doffy, it's not about how many people they take away, it's that they want to take away the best batch of people." "What about our business after that?" Treble said anxiously. The cultivation of financial personnel was not a simple matter. Their weapons business needed these people everywhere, which also gave Doflamingo a headache. If it were before, he might have found a way to intercept them, but now he was considered secretly recruited. Going against the world government again wouldn't be appropriate. As for not leaving evidence or anything, when had the world government ever valued such things? They only needed to know that this was his territory, so if something happened, they would definitely come looking. Besides this, is there anything else? Treble thought for a moment, nodded, and said, yes, it's said that the world government people also want to allocate funds to support the schools on the island, expanding the scale of the schools and so on. It's not just here. I heard that people have gone to any kingdom and island with a certain industrial base. Oh, right, it's not just financial personnel, I thought about it, any excellent talent in the administrative aspect will be transferred away. Anyway, the world government people are making a lot of noise. Hearing this, Doflamingo shook his head and chuckled. Foo, then there's nothing we can do. This is clearly an important operation of the world government, but we can't be the only ones suffering. Go and reveal the locations of those influence that are competing with us to them. Besides their headquarters, they must also have the situation of their factory and financials. Treble nodded repeatedly and responded, leaving Duffy's room. What exactly do you want to do, Five Elders? Doflamingo gazed at the clear blue sky and fell into thought. Or is it the meaning of that person? Since returning from Mary Joey's, he had been thinking about one question. If that Lord Imu was truly a monster who had existed for hundreds of years, then why did he only appear now and create this 7 warlords of the sea? Or had this 7 warlords of the sea actually existed for a long time, and he was just a new generation of members? What does the world government need so many administrative and financial personnel for? For some reason, Doflamingo vaguely felt that the wind of the world was changing. Chapter 75, The Poneglyph Taken Away. Deep beneath the sea, 10,000 meters down, Fishman Island bathed in brilliant sunlight. Ryugu Palace remained dazzling and bright, that golden-green dragon still so luxurious and mighty. The catfish fishman left minister stood below, reporting in a deep voice to King Neptune on the throne, His Majesty, we have made contact with Fisher Tiger. He said he will be back on Fishman Island in 3 days at the latest. Is that so? What did he say? Is he willing to join the Marines? King Neptune stroked his long, orange red beard and asked. Fisher Tiger's answer was no. He said that having Jinbi and Aladdin on the Marine side is enough. He hopes to join the Sea King army instead, and then head to Sabati Archipelago to protect our future compatriots, so they can live and play there in peace. After listening, King Neptune pondered for a moment, then nodded. All right, the Sea King army stationed at Sabati Archipelago does indeed need an expert to hold the fort. We need to communicate this matter with the Marines and explain the situation clearly, so as not to cause any misunderstandings. Yes, His Majesty. The left minister responded respectfully. How is the situation over at Sabati Archipelago now? Have any specific news been sent back? King Neptune continued to ask. The left minister replied, since it's the first time, the right minister went personally to command. I heard that the facilities in Zone 62 are very complete and can be easily moved into with just minor adjustments. They are currently familiarizing themselves with the entire environment of Sabati Archipelago under the guidance of the Marines. Starting tomorrow, they will officially begin their patrol mission. According to the Marines' explanation, this is to allow the resident on the island to get used to the presence of the Fishman tribe, preparing for the future reception of civilian Fishman tribe members. King Neptune nodded with satisfaction, saying, excellent, very stable. I am becoming more and more confident in our future cooperation. It seems the world government is also full of sincerity this time. Yes, ever since the Marines entered Fishman Island, they have already dealt with over a dozen groups of pirate attempting to capture mermaid. Many mermaid have been saved because of this. Now, the citizens' attitude towards the Marines is gradually becoming welcoming and enthusiastic. The left minister said with a joyful face. Previously, Fishman Island lacked expert and found it difficult to contend with those human pirate with high bounty. But now, with officers from Marine headquarters stationed here, the pressure has suddenly decreased significantly. Whenever the Sea King army encounters pirate they cannot handle, they always request support from the Marines on the island immediately, which has also made the relationship between the two races closer. However, giving those 2 poneglyph from the sea forest to the world government, your humble minister still feels some worry in my heart. I always feel this goes against the instructions of our ancestors. The left minister looked at King Neptune hesitantly. Is doing this really alright? Alas, this old man truly had no choice. I don't know where the world government learned of this matter. That Vice Admiral Aokiji personally came to request them, to take them away along with the 200 fishmen heading to the Marines. King Neptune frowned, pulling hard at his beard, and said with a troubled expression, tell me, could I refuse? Poneglyph is explicitly forbidden by the world government for research and possession. It was one thing when the world government didn't know, we could just not mention it. But now that they know, They must cooperate and send the items over. Honestly, the world government not charging Fishman Island with the crime of concealment is already being quite courteous. Your humble minister understands. The left minister sighed. Upon the throne, the King Neptune of huge body size fell into a moment of recollection. Over 800 years ago, Joy Boy made a promise with the mermaid princess of that time, to use Noah to bring all fishman and mermaid to the sea surface, to live forever under the sunlight. But in the end, due to an accident, the promise was not kept. Therefore, the apology text was inscribed onto a poneglyph, and finally, a prophecy was left behind, saying that one day in the future, a person would appear to fulfill this promise in his stead. Only when that day arrives will Noah be given its mission for the first time. This is the legend passed down through generations of Fishman Island royalty. Although they cannot understand the writing on the poneglyph, they remember this legend very clearly. Because of this, leaving the seabed and enjoying the sunlight and forest on the sea surface became the centuries-long aspiration of all Fishman tribe members, and they guarded Noah for generations. But now, under the guidance of the world government, the aspiration of the Fishman tribe to live openly under the sunlight is about to arrive. It seems Noah is not needed, nor is there a need to continue waiting for the person who can replace Joy Boy to appear. This made King Neptune's mood incredibly complex at this moment. Could it be that the legend is truly just a legend? Or perhaps, that person has already appeared, but has appeared on the side of the world government? Alas, our Fishman Island can only trust the world government and see how things go. King Neptune raised his head and looked upwards. His deep gaze seemed to pierce through the ceiling, the roof, through the 10,000 meters of deep sea, and the red line. But please, do not disappoint us, celestial dragons. Above the red line, within Holy Land Marie-Joyce, was currently alone in the deepest underground level of Pangaea Castle. This is the history storage room. The existence of poneglyph is naturally known to the world government. There are also specialized teams responsible for searching for and recovering them. The highest person in charge is Saint Marcus Mars. So, over the years, some poneglyph have been found and placed entirely in this dark and cold place. And now, those two new items from Fishman Island have also been placed here. Apology text, huh? Stood before the deep blue poneglyph, dozens of meters high, and sighed. Looking at it, memories from the depths of his mind slowly surfaced. Joy Boy's face and figure seemed to appear before his eyes. I bet you never would have thought that the one to fulfill the promise in your stead, to give Fishman Island sunlight, forest, and freedom, would be none other than me, right? The me of that time personally destroyed that great kingdom where all races coexisted. The current me will create a world government that can truly be called a place where all races coexist, and one that is even greater and more magnificent, in my own way. In his view, the great kingdom of that time was good, but unfortunately, it wasn't his great kingdom, so it should be destroyed. Breaking free from his memories, Im's gaze swept towards the red poneglyph beside it. Over the years, the world government truly hadn't found a poneglyph with the nature of a road poneglyph. This could be considered the first. This way, even if someone else searches for road poneglyph in the future, it will be useless even if they gather the other three outside. To be honest, as a transmigrator, didn't think these poneglyph had much use, except for the one that recorded ancient weapon. In his opinion, past history is past history. Even if there were indeed schemes and tricks during the war, wasn't it ultimately about the victor becoming king and the loser becoming a bandit? As long as the future world government can make the majority of the citizen of various kingdoms live comfortably, eat well, drink well, dress well, and everything is harmonious, then what does it matter if the past history is revealed one day? How many people would abandon the food in their bowl, take off their fine clothes, leave behind their healthy growing children, pick up a blade and fight the world government to avenge the great kingdom of that time? No matter how darkness the past, it is ultimately the past, and it can never defeat the light of the future. However, collecting poneglyph has no downsides. He had no intention of stopping this work from continuing. Saving one trouble is saving one trouble. Anyway, his subordinates are busy with it, he just needs to reveal the few locations he knows. The most important thing now is to recover the poneglyph hidden in the royal tomb of the Alabasta Kingdom. It records the location of the Dark King's main body, which can be considered dangerous items. But how should I tell people about this? Say there are prohibited items in your ancestral tomb and people need to go in to recover them. Himself was amused by these words. Forget it, let's have someone talk to them first. It's best to negotiate amicably. After all, it's Alabasta, and I don't really want to use force. Vivi is quite beautiful. Chapter 76, How to Fool the Five Elders. The temperature in the history storage room was particularly low, so low it could even be called a cold storage room. The lighting was also quite dim, giving it a gloomy and terrifying feel. Fortunately, didn't feel the slightest discomfort about any of this. These poneglyphs stirred thoughts of Joy Boy, preventing him from leaving in a hurry. The tennis games of the past few days had greatly relieved his psychological pressure, so he was in a relatively pleasant mood. If it were the previous him, he would naturally think that Joy Boy was dead and would no longer cause serious trouble for himself and the world government. But he was different. He knew very well that Joy Boy was very likely not completely dead. Slowly walked to another compartment, where some extremely important historical relics were stored. For example, the enormous straw hat in the ice vault before him. This was the straw hat Joy Boy wore on his head back then. Depositing his will into Nika, oh no, the gum fruit, and achieving another form of eternal life through the devil fruit's reincarnation mechanism? You're something else, big guy. Recalled events from several hundred years ago and smiled freely. The previous him would probably have been very angry. A devil fruit is eaten by a person and parasitizes within their body. After the person dies, it transforms into an information stream, returning to nature to find suitable fruit to reappear. During this process, there must be a certain conscious entity with some intelligence. This point has already been discovered and utilized by Vegapunk and others in the future of the original timeline. This is especially evident with animal system devil fruits, which inherently contain something similar to a beast soul within the fruit itself. Therefore, as a gum fruit awakener, Joy Boy was completely capable of consciousness replacement or deposition. It is very clear that people in this world have souls. However, it's likely not everyone has the ability to deposit their soul within a devil fruit. Thus, thought of hockey. And as the strongest expert in this world, his understanding of hockey was also the deepest. Hockey is something that can carry and receive information. Writing with armament hockey, even if you don't understand the meaning of the writing, as long as you have the corresponding observation hockey, you can perceive the content the writer wanted to express. This is one of the effects of the so-called listening to the voice of all things. However, he could understand the writing on the poneglyphs, as he himself was from that era. Hockey that can carry and receive information, coupled with a sufficiently strong soul, and devil fruit ability awakening, these three conditions should be indispensable. The person who eats the gum fruit will possess the unique physique of the Lunarian tribe, the elastic insulator like rubber and the ability to ignite, and will also be parasitized by the Sky Joy Boy. When the ability user awakens, that's when he will reawaken. Counted his speculation based on his previous life's memory. Or rather, this could no longer be considered speculation, it should be called confirmed. Although the previous self didn't know these things, he knew that the gum fruit was Joy Boy's ability. So, after finding it in the future, he dispatched Cypher Paul 9 agent led by Who's Who to escort it back, but it was snatched by Shanks. Stood rooted to the spot for a long time, staring at the giant straw hat in the ice vault, lost in deep thought, because these matters were very important. He was thinking about how to deal with this Shanks. First of all, he was definitely a descendant of the celestial dragons, otherwise, it would be impossible for him to sit on the sofa in the Hall of Authority and have a meeting with the 5 elders. This kid is probably like Doflamingo, also an emissary under my command. But this guy is quite an actor. In the end, he still sided with Roger, who raised and taught him, and directly stole the gum fruit because he felt that his celestial dragon identity plus his own strength was enough to handle the world government's retaliation. He succeeded. Mihawk, who was sent there, fought a big battle with him, with no clear winner, and instead they became close friends who cherished each other. What a case of no fight, no friendship. He saying this, a cold smile appeared at the corner of Im's mouth. The future 5 elders, or rather I, saw that Shank's wings were fully grown and continued to maintain contact with him under his celestial dragon identity, wanting to regulate the world situation and balance through him. But the problem is, what I want now is not to maintain balance. The so-called 4 emperors must be dealt with. Use them if they can be used, but if not, they cannot be kept. In this way, Shank's value to the world government was not that great, he was just an wild descendant with celestial dragon blood. This little guy Shanks must be brought back. Since he's a celestial dragon, according to the house arrest order I issued, he naturally has to roll back. As for killing him, that's impossible. The privilege and status of the celestial dragons must be maintained. Celestial dragons can only die of old age, they absolutely cannot be killed by others, unless the one doing the killing is himself. It is only right and proper for the king of the celestial dragons to grant a celestial dragon death. This is Im's stance. I remember Shanks is only 15 this year and is definitely in the East Blue. That makes things easy. Oh, right, while I'm at it, have Cypher Paul 1 agent also bring back that kid Buggy. Im immediately thought of the Buggy Ball's great power in the future. In his opinion, Buggy should continue to research in this area, perhaps forming a partnership with Cuddy Flam later on. 10 minutes later, he contacted Saint Shepherd Jupiter via transponder snail and gave a series of orders. Because the content was quite extensive, The latter kept nodding on the other end. Oh, and from now on, Cypher Paul will abolish the rule of being sent to prison for mission failure. For mission failure, give a certain punishment and emotion depending on the situation. Im felt that situations like who's must be prevented. Who knows how much talent has been lost because of such things? Besides, how much time and resources does it take to cultivate an excellent Cypher Paul agent? As long as there is no malicious defection, they shouldn't be pushed too hard. Yes, understood. Don't worry, it will definitely be changed. Saint Shepherd Jupiter didn't dare to ask anything and could only agree, although his mind was filled with countless question marks. The poneglyph in the Alabaster Funeral Temple, Shanks and Buggy in the East Blue. After the call ended, putting the handset back, Saint Shepherd Jupiter's face was full of surprise. Shanks, a former crewmate of the Roger Pirates, is actually a descendant of the Figureland family celestial dragons, a survivor of the God Valley incident. If that's the case, then he indeed needs to be invited back, otherwise, it would be troublesome if he turned into another Doflamingo. But why invite Buggy back too, and even send him to the science unit for training? Im returned to the surface. Since the night was already deep, he went back to the treehouse between the moon by himself. Jian and Stussy stayed in the rooms vacated by the maids, waiting for Dawn to continue playing tennis with him. Should I tell the 5 elders about the Stargate? Although I decided to start researching the First World after this reverie, it might be better to mention it beforehand. The first batch of personnel also needs time to screen. Lying on the large golden red double bed, Im pondered while looking at the cosmic star chart that appeared before his eyes. Looks like I need to think carefully about the wording. Speaking of which, how should I explain this thing so it sounds reasonable and logical? It's a bit difficult. They say fooling people is simple, but I'm too pure, naive, and kind. I really can't think of any deceptive lies. Sigh, what should I do? Chapter 77, Dragon Celebration Party. Although it was late at night, with a bright moon shining high and a sky full of stars, for some people, it was the perfect time to enjoy themselves. Manaford, as the headquarters of the Marines, the world's largest military organization, naturally did not lack electric light illumination, which also provided convenience for the island's nightlife. One by one, men and women, some wearing uniforms, or wearing casual clothes, gathered from all directions along the streets towards one location. Seagull Tavern. Here was the only tavern on this island, and also the largest multi-story public tavern capable of hosting thousands of people simultaneously. Whether active Marines, or family members, everyone could enjoy various types of alcohol and food here. In fact, over a decade ago, this tavern wasn't this large, nor was it multi-story, because there were fewer residents on the island back then. According to regulations, as long as one reached the military rank of headquarters lieutenant commander, they could bring their family members. However, not many people were willing to move such a long distance before. But since the matter 8 years ago where Marine Admiral Zephyr's family members were attacked and killed by pirates outside, nearly 80% of Marine officers chose to bring their families here. As a result, the population surged, and the higher-ups allocated funds to expand the tavern. Because of this, an interesting saying circulated, saying that because the island's people increased and there weren't enough seats in the tavern, Fleet Admiral Kong found it difficult to even find a spot to have a drink. In a fit of anger, he ordered another floor to be built. At this moment, inside this incredibly spacious tavern, intense drum beats and various string instrument sounds, accompanied by infectious female singing voices, freely echoed through every corner of the air. There were no colorful lights, nor were there flirtatious women in revealing clothes, only warm, pale yellow lighting. But this did not diminish the lively atmosphere in the slightest. Around sturdy square wooden tables sat cheerful drinkers, no longer mindful of the differences in identity and military rank between them. Holding large beer mugs filled with golden liquid, they laughed heartily, arms around each other's shoulders. Bartenders, who were family members, swiftly weaved between tables and people, delivering alcohol and meat to every guest, chatting and laughing with them from time to time. Cheers. On the second floor, a group of people pushed 3 wooden tables together, picked up their slightly heavy beer mugs, clinked them together, and then tilted their heads back to drink heartily, the liquid in their cups rushing down their throats at an extremely fast speed. Bang, bang, bang. One by one, the empty beer mugs were placed heavily back on the table. Q's, with a smile on his face, laughed loudly at Dragon, who was sitting opposite him. Congratulations, you've made a great contribution and been promoted to Vice Admiral. Congratulations. Congratulations. Among us, after Q's and the other 2, another Vice Admiral has appeared. Ha 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 ha, quickly tell us how you took down that slave king. Dragon stood up and smiled as he scanned his friends around him, Q's, Anigamo, Momonga, Gomail. All were graduated cadets from the first 3 batches of the training camp. Although there were cadets every year in the training camp, in terms of relationships, the first 3 batches were the closest. Those who came after were more distant, only considered ordinary colleagues. Except for those who couldn't return from outside, everyone else gathered here to celebrate his promotion to Vice Admiral today. Teacher, very much thank you for coming to support me. This glass is just for you. Finally, Dragon's gaze rested on the most respected elder, Zephyr. He picked up a beer, filled his cup, and then drank it down in one gulp again. Ha 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 ha, good drinking capacity. Zephyr saw this and laughed heartily with satisfaction. Not to be outdone, he picked up the cup Kuzen had helped fill and also downed it. Alright, that's enough beer for now. I want to taste what Fishman Island's alcohol is like. You guys help yourselves. Today, he was originally chatting with Kuzen in the office when he received a phone call from Tsuru, telling him that another one of his students had become a vice admiral. Kuzen, who heard this nearby, enthusiastically organized this celebration party and even dragged him, the teacher, along, saying that he hadn't celebrated his own promotion to vice admiral before, so they could just do it together this time. Quickly tell us about your trip to the South Blue this time. Just reading the description in the newspaper makes one's blood boil. That slave king must be very strong, right? I heard from Rear Admiral Avane that you were quite injured? Kuzen urged, looking at Dragon who had sat down. Momonga, Onigamo, and the others around him were also full of curiosity. Speaking of which, the latest issue of the newspaper was sent to various places in the world this afternoon. Now, everyone knew about Dragon defeating the Slave King and saving hundreds of thousands of innocent citizens. This also became the biggest topic of conversation in the Seagull Tavern tonight. Look, the Marines at the neighboring tables were all pricking up their ears, openly looking over. Alright then, I'll start from when I receive the mission order. The process is a bit long, but I'll try to keep it brief. Dragon didn't refuse, but there was no hint of smugness on his face. He remained as steady and composed as ever, which made Zephyr's gaze towards him even more appreciative. Zephyr's most famous students before this were Sakazuki, Borsalino, and Kuzen, but now there was also Dragon. To be honest, among these 4, his favorite was Dragon, because he was the most serious about martial arts. Next was Sakazuki, and the person he disliked the most was Borsalino. As Dragon recounted his story, although the music and singing from the first floor continued, everyone at Kuzen's table, as well as the surrounding Marines and family members, naturally quieted down, even deliberately lightening the force with which they put down their beer mugs. Even the well-traveled Zephyr was listening silently. Since stepping down from his admiral position and becoming the principal of the Marine Academy, he no longer paid special attention to outside matters, only glancing at major events like the execution of the Pirate King. When Dragon began talking about leading 50 headquarters officers and using the Hurricane Fruit ability to launch a surprise attack on Shabak City from the sky via airship, the expressions of the listeners around became excited and expectant. Kuzen, Momonga, Onigamo, and others closest to him listened with great interest, and when they heard that over 100 black mark guards with strength capable of suppressing headquarters lieutenant commanders appeared, they frowned. But the most captivating part began when Slave King Tlimikan made his powerful appearance, accompanied by Sandstorm. Powerful armament hockey, observation hockey, exquisite staff arts, and even the Devil Fruit awakening ability that could capture Sandstorm as a pet slave. Each of these points made one feel the Slave King's strength. Kuzen even pondered to himself, could he have endured it if it were him? His Ice Fruit ability had not yet undergone awakening, and his martial arts and hockey were not as good as Dragon's. It seemed a bit uncertain no matter how he looked at it. Thinking about his title of Admiral candidate, he couldn't help but feel somewhat concerned, or rather, a sense of nervousness and urgency arose. Among the 4 Logia users in the Marine headquarters currently, it was clear that he was the weakest. Although this had a lot to do with age, strong was strong, and weak was weak. When facing a powerful enemy, they wouldn't care how old you were. Furthermore, he would be stationed long-term at Fishman Island in the future. That place was the gate between Paradise and the New World, and he would definitely encounter experts from the New World in the future. It seems I need to hurry up and improve my strength after returning. Whether it's for myself or for protecting the safety of Fishman Island, I must reach Admiral-level combat power as soon as possible. Kuzen's gaze gradually became determined as Dragon narrated. Chapter 78, Dragon's new position and wish. That's the whole process. Dragon said in a deep voice, looking like he still felt a lingering fear. To be honest, there was a bit of luck involved in defeating that Slave King. It was very difficult, and I feel that if we were to do it again, the outcome would likely be different. Indeed, it was really close. If you hadn't forcefully increased your strength in that most dangerous, desperate situation, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Onigamo, usually optimistic, also had a serious expression at this moment. Zephyr scanned his outstanding disciples and asked, "What did you learn from Dragon's battle this time?" Momonga, Onigamo, and the others exchanged glances. Fusion's gaze revealed a hint of helplessness. He had already guessed what this important figure was going to say. As expected. Seeing his students remain silent, Zephyr didn't hold back and said heavily, "The importance of martial arts and hockey." This slave king neglected martial arts and hockey, focusing all his efforts on his devil fruit ability. He did awaken because of it, but what was the result? He was easily caught up to by Dragon, who is decades younger than him. Teacher, from Dragon's description, this slave king's hockey and martial arts weren't weak, were they? A less famous colonel at the table scratched the back of his head and chuckled. And it wasn't easy for me to catch up either. Dragon couldn't help but inwardly complain beneath his calm exterior, only to see Zephyr let out a cold snort. Humphrey, his age is similar to mine, and his martial arts and hockey could only slightly suppress this kid at first, and were later surpassed. Is that not weak enough? Hearing this, let alone Kuzen and the others around, even the Marines at the next table twitched their mouths, roaring inwardly. My goodness, you were a former Marine Admiral, and now you still hold the Admiral rank. Are you really using yourself as a standard for comparison? If that's the case, 90% of people the same age in this world have lived their lives in vain. Zephyr ignored them. You must remember, whether you are an ability user or not, martial arts and hockey are the foundation of everything. You cannot rely too much on devil fruit abilities, otherwise, your final fate will be the same as this slave king's. Do you understand? Yes, Teacher Zephyr. Dragon, Kuzen, and the others no longer had any objections, responding in unison with tacit understanding. This made the other Marines look on with envy, as Zephyr's training camp wasn't open to just anyone. Seeing this, Zephyr nodded with satisfaction, then looked at Dragon. Good, your aura is impressive. Oh, and those two cats you brought, I heard your description of them is quite good, they are promising talents. Have them report to the training camp next year, and they can continue following you after they graduate. That's great. I thank you on their behalf. Dragon showed a hint of joy. This morning, he reported on his mission in the Fleet Admiral's office and was promoted to Vice Admiral on the spot. Before leaving, he mentioned Black Cat, Three-Legged Cat and White Cat Fishing Little Cat. There were no complications. After all, they were two zone users. Khan the Iron Fist agreed to incorporate them into Marine headquarters and assign them as his direct subordinates. Now they could train under Teacher Zephyr for another year. This was definitely a rare opportunity. The future of these two cats would at least be that of a colonel. Speaking of which, ordering the capture of the slave king from the underworld, thoroughly investigating the Tutmos kingdom, liberating over 200,000 slaves, then organizing fleets and personnel from various nations to provide them with medical treatment, food, and temporary residence, and finally having the South Blue Marines send them back to their hometown. Kuzen took a sip of the golden liquid in his wine glass, let out a long breath, and grinned. These matters, put into the past, were truly unimaginable. If Dragon hadn't told us himself, we probably wouldn't have believed it even if we heard it, right? Momonga, Onigamo, and the others nodded thoughtfully. Although Kuzen's words were relatively subtle, everyone understood. Dragon had the deepest realization from this experience. He looked at Kuzen and said, I think you should have also participated in similar things recently that were previously unimaginable, and now seem somewhat incredible, for example, regarding Fishman Island. He was thinking of the 200 Fishman tribe and Merfolk tribe members who had arrived this morning. Hey, it's more than just that. Listen to me next, and you'll be even more surprised. Kuzen said with a flushed face and a laugh. I'll start with the mission I received earlier regarding the Drum Kingdom. Next, he vividly recounted how he followed Minister Mick of the Administrative Department to the Drum Kingdom to painstakingly build ice stairs with a height of 5,000 meters, how the world government designated the Drum Kingdom as a medical development cooperation nation, and how they established a medical academy and the world hospital system. After finishing, he then described in detail how he followed Senior Director Coulson of the Administrative Department to Fishman Island, and how the two sides signed the Equal and Friendly Relations Communique, becoming more and more excited as he spoke. He repeatedly picked up his beer glass, his inner joy was clearly visible on his face. The Marine elites present also clicked their tongues in wonder and exclaimed repeatedly, especially Dragon and Zephyr, who felt greatly shocked. They didn't feel much about the Drum Kingdom matter, as they weren't very knowledgeable about medical development. But establishing a Marine branch on Fishman Island, allowing the Sea King Army to be stationed and patrol on Sabati Archipelago, allowing the Fishman tribe and Merfolk tribe to join the Marines, and even other departments of the world government, and allowing Fishman to live, reside, and play freely on Sabati Archipelago in the future, these things sounded outrageous. What was wrong with the world government? Dragon and Zephyr exchanged glances, both seeing the shock in each other's eyes, with the latter's surprise being the most intense, as it was the first time he had become aware of these strange changes. Is this still the world government I know? So that's it. No wonder Fleet Admiral Kong sent me to Sabati Archipelago to be the base commander. Dragon immediately thought of his next position. Marine Vice Admirals are divided into two types. One type is stationed at Marine headquarters, and the other is sent to the major direct branches on the Grand Line, among which the GX series branches are the most famous. However, besides these, there are actually some smaller branches that are also directly subordinate to Marine headquarters. The Marine branch on Sabati Archipelago is one such case. After being promoted to Vice Admiral this time, he was directly appointed as the Marine branch base commander stationed on Sabati Archipelago. Fleet Admiral Kong's requirement was to strictly crack down on pirates arriving there and protect the Fishman tribe and Merfolk tribe on the island. He also had to regulate the coating industry on the island, prohibit providing services to pirate ships, dismantle slave trade houses, arrest relevant criminals, and liberate and properly handle the slaves, although those slaves who were originally pirates needed to be escorted to a nice lobby for trial, which was equivalent to sending them to Impel Down. Overall, Dragon would have many things to deal with in the future, and they were all relatively dangerous matters. After all, whether it was pirates who could cross the Grand Line to reach Sabati Archipelago or the malice and retaliation from the slave trade, ordinary people really couldn't handle it. However, Dragon accepted the order without any hesitation, because in his opinion, these were the most just things. While listening to Cuzin's excited narration, the former's gaze looked towards the direction of Holy Land Marie Joais. Regardless of what caused these strange changes, or who is behind them, I sincerely hope that this change continues. I am willing to go through fire and water for this, and do my utmost to promote and implement it. Since you are willing to change, then I, Dragon, will accompany you to the end. Chapter 79, The 4 Checkpoints of the Grand Line. Bonus chapter, cough, 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 cough. Just as Cuzin finished recounting his recent experiences, Zephyr suddenly started coughing, and it was quite difficult. From his complexion and rapid breathing, one could tell how uncomfortable he was. He had actually wanted to cough earlier, but deliberately held it back, not wanting to interrupt Cuzin's speech. Now that Cuzin was basically done, he finally couldn't hold it in anymore. Teacher? Teacher Zephyr? What's wrong? Momonga, Onigamo, and the others' expressions changed drastically as they asked with concern. They hadn't seen Zephyr for a while since graduating, as everyone was busy. Although being busy was good, it also meant they knew less about Zephyr's recent situation. Phew. It's nothing, just a minor ailment, no need to make a fuss. I'm much better now. Zephyr's asthma finally stabilized. He let out a long breath, grinned, and took out 2 white pills from his pocket, swallowing them with some beer. This illness of his had started appearing in the past 2 years, but it wasn't very serious. He would just occasionally feel chest tightness, difficulty breathing, and cough. He had actually consulted a doctor on the island and was prescribed medicine, which was quite effective. However, he was advised not to drink alcohol or smoke, but these were Zephyr's favorites, and it wasn't that easy to quit. Teacher, although I don't understand medical skill, judging from your symptoms just now, it seems related to breathing. I think you should take it seriously. I'm sure you understand yourself. As Cuzin spoke, the others around him nodded repeatedly. Zephyr himself naturally knew what he meant. The relationship between breathing and combat power was something he, as a master of pure martial arts, understood better than anyone. If a person's breathing wasn't smooth, they simply couldn't exert much strength. Even the essence of life return was inextricably linked to breathing. Didn't I already find a doctor and get medicine? It provides good relief when it acts up, but it can't cure it completely. Zephyr showed a hint of distress. I heard that if this asthma gets more severe, you'll need to use that hormone spray to relieve it. Cuzin recalled something from before and said, since the doctors at headquarters can't cure it, how about finding doctors from the medical academy in Drum Kingdom? Doctors from Drum Kingdom, what's the difference? Onigamo asked curiously. Zephyr and the others also looked over. They had indeed heard Cuzin talk about things on Drum Kingdom before, but they didn't know much about the doctors there. Cuzin chuckled. I'm not entirely sure either, but I heard Minister Mick say that there are the best doctors in the world there.